Welcome and good evening to the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for June 16th, 2020. If we could please call the roll.
Councilor Contreras.
Here.
Councilor Brennan.
Here.
Councilor Whiting.
Here.
Councilor Lehman.
Present.
Mayor Mars.
Here. Thank you very much. Item number 2, if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Approval of the agenda. Are there any changes, Mr. Reynolds?
Nothing from staff, sir.
Okay. Councilor Whiting?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
A second.
I have a motion to approve the agenda and a second by Councilor Brennan. The agenda as stated. Any discussion? Discussion by voice vote. Mr. Reynolds?
Councilor Contreras.
Aye.
Councilor Brennan.
Aye.
Councilor Whiting.
Aye.
Councilor Lehman.
Aye.
Mayor Mars.
Aye. The agenda has been approved. We will move to item number 4, consent agenda. And before I ask Mr. Reynolds, we will stand with corrected minutes that were sent to all of us as part of the standard consent agenda. Any other changes?
No, sir.
No other changes? Councilor Lehman?
4B1 removed.
4B1?
Yes.
Others? Seeing none? Councilor Lehman?
Motion to move the consent agenda as modified.
Second.
I have a motion to approve the modified consent agenda and a second by Councilor Contreras. Before we vote, we would read the modified consent agenda into the public record. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor Mars and members of council. These are the consent agenda items for 16 June of 2020. 4A1 approves the minutes from the June 2nd, 2020 meeting. 4A2 updates on prorated liquor fees. 4B2 approves the proposal from Confluence in the amount of $29,450 for design services for Quarry Lake Park. 4B3 approves the proposed concept plan for Stagecoach Park. 4B4 authorizes appropriate city officials to execute the commercial building encroachment and access a pertinent easement. 4C1 approves the 2020 amended Drug Task Force grant agreement. 4C2 declares 7 forfeited vehicles held by the police department as surplus property and authorizes their proper sale or disposal. And 4D1 authorizes an agreement and accepts a donation of shade structures for the Lions Park splash pad from the Shakopee Lions Club.
Thank you very much. I have a motion and a second for the modified consent agenda. It's been read into the public record. There would be no further discussion. Mr. Reynolds, by voice vote.
Councilor Contreras.
Aye.
Councilor Brennan.
Aye.
Councilor Whiting.
Aye.
Councilor Lehman.
Aye.
And Mayor Mars.
Aye. Thank you very much. Moving ahead now, I'd like to call on any resident citizen that would like to come forward on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward and welcome. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Peter. My last name is Mwaofune. I will spell it for you. I do have something I've written up for the council that I'll hand over at the end of my discussion. The reason I'm here today is that I had an incident with Chipotle, the Shakopee Chipotle. Because of the COVID-19 and layoffs and all that, I started working with DoorDash, doing some deliveries during this time period. So I generally will get a call to go there and pick up an order and deliver. On June 6th, I went there to pick up an order and waited for an order that should have been ready in 5 minutes for 20 minutes. And I spoke to the lady that's on the counter and I said, I've been here for about 20 minutes. People who are coming from outside, about 10 of them has been, there's orders have been processed and they left. The online orders, which is the one I come to pick, they've only processed one order in 20 minutes. Why is that so? I'm late and all that. So he said, what's the name of the order? So I showed him my phone. I said, this is the order. Just as I was talking to her, two girls who actually were the ones processing the order came out, and they're saying, well, the reason we don't have an order is because online order is big. I said, I'm not questioning your process. I'm just saying 10 people have come through here, only one here, and I'm late already. One of them said, well, if you're going to start yelling at us, maybe you should leave. I said, I wasn't yelling. I was just asking questions. Then one of the tall girls came and said, you have to leave. I said, well, instead of talking with me, why don't you make the order so I can just pick it up and go? So I stayed there, and she left. After about 5 minutes, they processed 3 orders on the online side. Mine wasn't included. So I got up and just said, I don't know what's happening. I told one of the a male employee, he has a long earrings, that's all I remember. And I said, I'm going to leave. I pointed to my car where it will be outside on the parking lot. If they did indeed make my order, please bring it out. I will wait for 5 minutes. If I don't say anything in 5 minutes, I will leave. And 5 minutes, they didn't come, so I started my support, calling DoorDash support to say, I'm going to leave. Just as that was happening, 2 police squad cars pulled into the parking lot. Now, I've worked for them I've been doing this for 6 weeks. Once in a while, I see police cars in and around the area, so it didn't even register to me. So I finished with the DoorDash until I left. But the next order I got brought me to 5 guys, which is adjacent to the building there. And the police cars were still there. And that's when it dawned on me. I said, did she really call the police for this? And I tried to process it, but I was working, so I left. But later in the evening, at night, it started bothering me. Why? We're just asking a question about the status of my order warrant a call to the police. And I thought about it, but I didn't want to jump into conclusions. So the next day, I went to this restaurant and asked for a manager. A girl came out. I said I wanted to talk about the incident that happened yesterday. I was talking, she wasn't listening. And I said, is there another person I could talk to? She reached out to the counter, gave me a card of the name Vanessa Wright. It says it's the general manager. And I said, okay, write down my name. I gave her my name and said, write down my name and my phone number, give it to her, and said, I have some issue that I want to discuss with her. And that was on the 7th, it was a Sunday. I didn't hear anything the rest of the day. I didn't hear anything until about 2:30 on Monday. I didn't hear anything. So I decided to call. When I called, the phone went into the voicemail. So I left a detailed message that I have something happened here. I just wanted to get perspective from you what happened. Since then, I've not heard anything from them. The reason I'm here, because the issues that I pointed out is that, first of all, I was hoping to find out from them, was that call really because of the incident that happened to us? No, till now, I don't know for sure because they didn't do that. I wanted to say maybe I should call the police, but the police even though I was in the parking lot when the police were there, they never came to me. The police never interacted with me. So I just felt it's not the right thing to go and start asking the police that. The police didn't come there of their own volition. Somebody called them. And I wanted to find out from Chipotle whether they do that. But nobody called me back, so I don't know for sure. But the reason I'm here is that we are all aware of what's going on. Personally, I have great respect for the police department. I think their job is difficult. But what annoyed me about this situation and made me want to come here and speak with you guys is that, first of all, they should not be used for, in my opinion, I was talking with people asking, why is my order late? If that is what warrants a police call, then we're using them for the wrong reasons. That's my opinion. Not to talk about, I mean, we all live in America and the things that's been going on lately about in America. There's difference between people of color when we interact with police. So there's no need for that interaction if it's unnecessary. If I was being disrespectful, causing commotion, throwing their stuff away, please, by all means, get people to restrain me, remove me from the scene. But I wasn't even talking to the two girls or the one that told me and threatened that she was going to call police. I didn't take her seriously because I said, what would you call the police for? But, I mean, I'm here. I'm going to pick up my order. I sort of just said, please make the order. Let me pick it up and go. I didn't take her seriously. And even initially when I saw the police cars in the lot, it didn't connect with me, but she threatened it, and 10 minutes later, the police were there. And so my reason for coming here is it's your job to regulate how the police works. And if the police are being used to do the job of supervisors in restaurants and all that, I don't think that's the good use of people's money. Not to talk about the social impact that has with people of color and other people like that. So, like I said, I have respect for the police and the job they do, and I don't think they should be using them for things that they're not done. Their job entails a lot. And if you guys can please make sure that I shouldn't be worried about going to a restaurant to pick up an order as part of my job and wonder what will happen to me. That shouldn't be happening. And I lived in this state for 30 years. I'm not originally from here, I'm originally from Nigeria, but I've lived here for 30 years. I'm so proud of this state that what happened here, it's just, this is not us. This is not Minnesotans. And anything that will lead to that, if we can nip it in the bud, make sure that that doesn't happen. And besides, that kind of service that they're calling the police for nothing is not a good use of taxpayers' money, which I know that you guys, that's your job here to make sure that this is properly. So I don't want to take too much of your time. I want to thank you for giving me the option, but that's, if you can do anything to make sure that please don't use the police for things they're not there for. And to me, sometimes it's like an intimidation. It's like, so if the police shows up, what happens? So I'm afraid to go there. That's not right. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so sorry about your experience. Not good. Do you have something written up? Yes. Thank you. And we can give that to staff.
All right.
And you were very kind. Thank you. Did you have a comment, Counselor?
No, thank you for bringing this forward. I think, it's important your message is important for people to hear. Yeah. And the use of the police force has become overused in things, and these times are very concerning times. So my guess, and I don't know, the police might have been there for burritos, but I'm not sure. But if they were there for you, we can't tell who's going to call.
Exactly.
But if they were there and talked to you, you'd understand that our police force would have talked to you and tried to help. I don't think you would have had anything to worry about.
That's true. But the reason I'm here, like I said, my being here is nothing political. I'm not representing any group. Right. I just felt that that's not just the fact that they call the police is what's my issue, not what the police do. Or the police I mean, I've lived there I've lived in Shackley for 3 years now. I've not had issue with police. So, but all I'm trying to say is let's make sure that someone is not using the police in that respect.
As the restaurant manager.
Like I say, like a supervisor. That if they have a supervisor, one thing that bothers me about Chipotle is that I've worked in very high positions, so I can tell when there's an order in place. People are milling around, there's nobody in charge, and so things just...
We can't help that.
No, you can't help that. That's not your role. But now, all of a sudden, the police is being called into a situation to begin to manage that. To me, that's not right. So
Did you say you never ended up getting a response from them?
exactly, because this could have been a 2-minute discussion between me and the manager. They say, "Oh no, it wasn't for you." I'll be fine. But she threatened it, and 10 minutes later, the police roll in there. So I'm wondering, and I stayed there just in case someone would say something, but they didn't. So if they have responded to me all this time, I may not be here because they might have said, "Oh, well, it's not for you, something else happened." But I would never know because I tried. I given them more than a week to say, "Hey, why did this happen?" Because I don't want to go back there and, there's a joke going around sometimes. They call someone Karen, like someone sitting out there, so there's a Karen in there, which somebody who just called the police on you for no reasons, right? So I just want to make sure that they, as an establishment, know, please do not use police in this instance. I wasn't there. This is not a job I'm going to depend on. In a week, I'll be done with them. But please do not do that, because if it's not me, somebody might react differently. And what do we know? We know what the history is here, so let's make sure we do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't catch the last name, and then to staff, can we make sure that all of council gets a copy of what Peter gave us?
Yes,
Yes,
I will do
can
that,
spell the
Councilor.
name if you want to write it down.
Is it on the sheet?
It's on the
That
sheet.
you're-
It is.
It's on the
Okay.
sheet. Both my name, my address, and my phone number is there.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other citizen would like to come forward and make comment to this council? Please state your name and address to the record, and welcome.
Hi. My name's Mary Isaacson. I own Babe's Place in Shakopee. And I'm back. So, I'm here again to just bring it up. I'm going to submit another letter for next month. I would like the city to grant us permission to close the alley from 5:30 to 7:30, 5:30, 7:30, Friday nights when I have my drawing come back up. The drawing is, right now I have $3,700 in the pot, so I know I'm going to get a lot of people. Because A, the people want to come. They need it for mental health. I mean, seriously. B, I want a social distance. I'm not planning on starting my drawing, nor am I planning on starting my croquis. I mean, I was doing that. I'm about the slow, gradual. So I want to, I'll reintroduce croquis July sometime, and then I would like to do the drawing, if I can, starting maybe in August. So I have time, but I want to do I still want to do the social distance, which I think is important. At least this way I have extra space that they can stand outside. And to just close the alley. I know Matt's main concern is there's no start time or start date and no end date. Again, I still can't give you that. I can't give you an end date. Potentially, I could use the alley for 1 week and it might go out. I don't need the alley anymore. I can't guarantee you it's going to go out in 1 week, and it could go out in 2 months. So I can't give you that. All I can do is give you a week notice that I'm going to close the alley, and you'll have that after the drawing on Friday night. When we do it, I can give you a notice saying the alley is back to normal. That's all I can do for you, Councilmember Lehman. I don't understand why you voted against. You weren't very clear on what all your issues were. And so I want to work with people to see this happen. And so I'm willing to do what I have to do because, again, I think it's very important for the community. And I'm the only one that's taken it all on.
You're going to resubmit?
I am going to resubmit. I'm going to get it to Lori.
Yeah.
And then you guys have a couple weeks. That's why I'm here now. You'll have a couple weeks to think. Nothing really is going to change from what I submitted the first time, unless you guys can give me some guidance on what you are exactly looking for that we can try to work together on. You know, so there's no change in the plans because it was a good plan to begin with,
Right.
I felt. But I know downtown, you know, we have the things going on downtown, and I haven't heard any different that it's not going well. And again, I'm only looking for 2 hours, 2.5 hours on a Friday night. And also keep in mind, this is my only alley that has other points of entrance and exits. So realistically, I am not closing the whole alley. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And I'll be back.
Any other resident like to come forward on an item not on the agenda? Talk about an item that will be on the agenda in the future, possibly? No. Thank you all then. Seeing none, we'll move ahead to item number 6, business removed from consent. And the item was 4B1. And Councilor Lehman, you had some questions?
Yes, Mayor, this is, well, if I read it right, it's 1.5 million in grants from the Met Council. My theory is if the Met Council is taking the dollars from property taxpayers, making all houses more unaffordable for projects that really are outside the scope of what I believe the Met Council's purview is.
Okay, well, I know that in the past you've had your feelings about Met Council and taxation without representation, but this
Yeah.
is trying to get some of that money back here to be local. And this is to apply for it, doesn't mean we're gonna get it. But it's certainly an opportunity, and I think we've proven in the last couple of years that we've gotten some grant money in different categories from the Met Council, so, are you still opposed to this?
I oppose the Met Council using property tax dollars without disclosing what its use is for, and giving out grants. And I would imagine if we added up all the grants that they've given out, it's much more than 1.5 million. And that dollars are coming directly from property taxpayers, some of which might struggle to make their house payments. So in effect, it's making these houses more unaffordable when they're saying they want housing affordability. So.
All right, thank you. Do you have any other questions?
No, sir.
Any other council members comment, questions on this? 4B1? Councilor Whiting?
Make a motion to approve resolution number R 2020-080 for the city of Shakopee to apply for a Livable Communities Demonstration Account Transit-Oriented Development Grant on behalf of Sand Companies Development for Core Crossings Apartments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Councilor Brennan. Further discussion? Discussion? Mr. Reynolds, by voice vote.
Councilor Contreras.
Aye.
Councilor Brennan.
Aye.
Councilor Whiting.
Aye.
Councilor Lehman.
Negative.
Mayor Mars.
Aye. That motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much. Moving ahead to 7A then, a public hearing for a vacation of a public right-of-way. And I would entertain a motion to open the public
Mr.
hearing.
Lehman had his hand up first, but I'll do it.
Counselor Whiting,
Make a motion to open a public hearing?
Counselor Contreras.
Second. Second.
I have a motion to open the public hearing in a second. Further discussion? Discussion? By voice vote, Mr. Reynolds.
Contreras.
Aye.
Counselor Brennan.
Aye.
Counselor Whiting.
Aye.
Counselor Lehman.
Yes.
Mayor Mars.
Aye. Public hearing is now open and Michael will present. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we have a public hearing for the vacation of public right-of-way access and drainage and utility easements located within Powers First Edition in the Jackson Elementary School subdivision. So this is the current Powers Second Edition next to Jackson Elementary School. There's an item later in the agenda that if this is approved, will replace the easements you're abandoning tonight with new ones. So these are the existing drainage and utility easements that will be vacated. This is the parcel that is owned by the Shakopee School District and sold to the developer. This is part of Lusitano Street that will also be abandoned. And then this was a previously approved access point to the VA, which is on that first lot 1, block 1, and you'll see later tonight we have a new Lusitano that will provide them access out onto Marystown Road. Then there are some minor roadway and utility easement vacations. So Trident Development is proposing their second phase of development on this property that requires a new plat. If approved, the new plat will incorporate the new right-of-way and utility requirements. So we ask that you approve Resolution 2020-78.
Thank you. Questions of staff? So the request is to vacate some easements, but then we would get them back in our later item agenda if that passed, correct?
Correct, Mayor.
Questions of staff? Counselor Lehman?
When was this parcel annexed into the city?
When was this parcel annexed into the city?
Mayor and Council, I believe 3 years ago, possibly. This had to be annexed in because it's across from Windermere, and there was an outlying parcel that was down in the corner owned by the Powers family that got annexed in, and then it was sold to Trident.
Okay.
Other questions of staff? Okay. The applicant, are we the applicant? Yes, sir. We are? Okay. Any other, this is a public hearing. Would anybody else like to come forward and discuss this item? This is a public hearing on this vacation. Anybody else like to come forward and make comment on this request? Seeing none?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing. Second.
I have a motion to close the public hearing by Councilor Brennan, a second by Councilor Contreras. Further discussion? Discussion all by voice vote. Mr. Reynolds?
Counselor Contreras.
Aye.
Counselor Brennan.
Aye.
Counselor Whiting.
Aye.
Counselor Lehman.
Aye.
Mayor Mars.
Aye. How would we like to proceed? The public hearing is now closed. Councilor Brennan?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number R 2020-078, a resolution approving the vacation of public right-of-way and access drainage and utility easements as dedicated within Outlet A, Lot 1, and Block 1, Powers First Edition in Lot 1, Block 1, Jackson Elementary School, located at the northeast corner of Casa 16 or 17th Avenue and Marystown Road, as depicted on the attached, as depicted in the sketches.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on this item to approve. Further discussion? Discussion?
Counselor Lehman.
Counselor Lehman.
Mayor, I have a technical question for you. If we approve this and don't approve the second action, would this lot then have no easements?
Huh, good question. Michael?
Mayor and council, we do not file the vacations until we do them simultaneously, so we file the vacation and the new plat at the same time.
Okay,
Follow-up question, Counselor?
nope.
Further discussion? Discussion? Discussion by voice vote, Mr. Reynolds?
Counselor Contreras.
Aye.
Counselor Brennan.
Aye.
Counselor Whiting.
Aye.
Counselor Lehman.
Aye.
Mayor Mars.
Aye. That motion passes. Thank you all very much. We will move ahead then. I would entertain a motion to recess for our Economic Development Authority meeting. Counselor Lehman?
Motion to recess to economic development meeting.
And I have a second by Counselor Whiting. Further discussion? Discussion by voice vote, Mr. Reynolds.
Counselor Contreras. Counselor Contreras.
Aye.
Counselor Brennan.
Aye.
Counselor Whiting.
Aye.
Counselor Lehman.
Aye.
Mayor Mars.
Aye. We are now adjourned for the EDA. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We can have that. We'll call the June 16th, 2020 meeting of the Shakopee Economic Development Authority to order. Mr. Reynolds, please make note of the roll. First item on the agenda, motion to approve the agenda. Mr. Mars.
Mr. President, I'll offer a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
We have a motion, Ms. Contreras. Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second by voice vote. Mr. Reynolds?
Ms. Contreras.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Lehman.
Aye.
Mr. Mars.
Aye.
And President Whiting.
Aye. Next on the agenda is the consent business. Mr. Mars?
Mr. President, I'll offer the consent business of the meeting EDA minutes from June 2nd, 2020.
A motion is second by Brennan. By voice vote, Mr. Reynolds?
Ms. Contreras.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Mr. Lehman.
Aye.
Mars.
Aye.
President Whiting.
Aye. Next item is item 4A, a commercial facade improvement loan for the bakery building. Mr. Kursky.
Good evening, Mr. President and board members. This is our first request of 2020 for a facade loan for the former Shakopee Bakery building. The applicant is in the process of getting ready to close on that property, renovate the building, and reopen it sometime this fall as a bakery. And they've requested, I believe their request was for $75,000, and staff in discussions with them feel that $60,000 is justified. We added in a couple of things that they did not include in their original estimate, and we would recommend moving forward. The account has over $200,000 in it. We've done numerous loans over the years. It's slowed down considerably in the past few years. I think last year we had one, which was over on 2nd Avenue. So we think this is a critical building. It's right behind a major $14 million investment. It's become kind of a blighted building in the downtown area, and it's a great opportunity to move it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Kursky. Are there questions of staff?
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Mars,
President,
go
just
ahead.
wanna, so we made no award and there was no applicant in 2019, is that correct? For the facade loan program?
Mr. Mars and President and board members, I believe there may have been one. There was a small renovation done on a building in downtown. I think it was $20,000. That was the only one, I believe, in 2019. And there's been nothing in 2020.
Further questions?
And the buildings surrounding it have been all applied in the past too and been fixed up in the past.
Mr.
correct?
President, board members, so H&R Block, which is 2 buildings or 3 buildings down, got a grant. The building, on both sides of this building, have received facade loans over the years. So much of this block has been redone. Again, this is a building that's been sitting there for quite a while. It's not currently open at all, and it's probably our most requested issue downtown. People want to know what's going on with the bakery.
Go ahead.
Last question, at least for now. Your staff report mentioned that there was just one bid. The applicant's aware they would need additional bids as well.
Mr. President, board members, correct. They have provided one general contractor and then numerous kind of side bids. We have given them name a couple other contractors that have done a lot of work downtown and asked them to reach out and get another second firm bid.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Any questions for the applicant? How would we like to proceed?
Are we gonna, Mr. President, are we gonna hear from the applicant or?
Yeah, would the applicant like to address? Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor and council members. Lori Bittner, Don Bittner with Bittner's Bakery, and we're very excited to be able to bring a bakery back to downtown and hopefully renovate it to a historic state and just provide for our community. We're longstanding residents with Shakopee and hope that you'll be able to help us a little bit. We're going to be into this building for a lot of money.
I want to thank you for the tour the other day. I haven't been in that building and haven't been in the back in the basement of that building. It is a piece of our history in Shakopee, and it still smells like the powder sugar icing that you might find on your favorite cookies or something. But you have a big project there, and I talked to you about the possibility of, sprinkling that building because it is historic. It's right in the middle of our downtown block, and that would add another probably 80-some thousand to this price tag, wouldn't it?
At least. I was speaking with Fire Marshal Pitch Schneider today, and he thought at least 75 to 80, maybe more.
Maybe more,
Because we've got, the basement, the bakery's part, and then the apartment above.
Yeah, to me, that would be a great investment to protect our downtown, but I know you can't afford it, and it's not required by any means for changing this building, but in my thought, maybe that'd be something that the city could help with too, in this, as an added level of protection for our downtown. Just a thought I wanted to put out there for comment from the council. But anything else you want to add?
We're just excited to provide the things that the bakery could provide back to Shakopee and the residents.
And there's some assets there that you're buying along with the building that you're going to utilize and...
Correct. We are buying all the equipment and the recipes.
Oh, okay. If you have your favorite Shakopee recipe, you may be able to get it soon. Mr. Lehman.
Mr. President, thank you. To the applicants, I've been pretty consistent on these loans in the past, whether it was Riverside Liquor, Babe's Place, and a few others. We do have a cap listed in our policy. I think it's $35,000. And yes, this body can deviate from that. The problem is if you deviate for one, you kind of have to deviate for the rest. I'm totally into it for the 35 because that's what the policy is. I wish you guys the very best. But to be consistent, I can't support 60.
Thank you, Councilor Lehman. Totally understand.
Totally with you. I hope you're successful. I'm looking forward to some awesome treats. And if it was 35, you'd have my vote.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I have a question. I know that your application had included roofing work, and I know that that was a big portion of what you were requesting, and that's not something that is covered by this loan program. Are you prepared to fix the roof and because
We are,
you didn't,
yes.
and it's in pretty
Yes,
bad shape.
the build, excuse me, Counselor Brennan. Yes, we will be fixing the roof. That is a definite thing. That is a definite item that needs to be addressed. The roof, the rest of the building is not going to withstand if we don't fix the roof.
And I would add that in the past, that had been covered on a couple of projects. I know that the criteria has changed over the years a few times, but just throw that in there for comment. But how would we like to proceed? Mr. Mars.
Mr. President, thank you. This project is very exciting. I didn't get a tour yet. I usually come in the front door and then leave, turn around and leave after I get a couple of donuts. But it's been many, many years, and excited that Bruce and Shirley, the previous owners, are at this point now that they can move forward. I know there's been some opportunities in the past that have kind of come and gone, but here's a new one now. A downtown bakery is vital to I think the economic activity of a downtown. There aren't very many left. A hometown bakery, I think that is very cool. Also, I look at the facade program that we've done over the years, and certainly the amounts have varied. But I'm counting 15 or 16 businesses that the city has helped. And with this money that's been granted out, but I think the economic boost that we've given to those businesses, the thriving downtown, has certainly outweighed the dollars that have been given because we've revitalized downtown. I know years ago we did a cornerstone new building on our main street that O'Brien's that I know it was a lot of money at that time and a previous council, but you look at the economic action that has caused and the overflow, and it's stretched all the way through our downtown. I believe these facade grant programs are really important, and I also put high value on one of the last buildings in our downtown to get done, and also the bakery aspect of it. So I stand in support of this application.
Thank you.
Is that a motion?
I certainly would. Well, are there any other questions?
Any other questions of the applicant or staff? I think a motion's in order.
Mr. President, I'd offer approval of a forgivable loan request to the Bitney Bakery in the amount not to exceed $60,000, subject to the following conditions. 2 bids must be submitted, reviewed, and funds are provided on a reimbursable basis. Building color to be cream and color approved by staff. Existing signs to be restored. Awning style to match the other new awnings in downtown. Existing stucco to be repaired. 2nd-story windows to be the 2 styles matching the historic profile of the building.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Contreras. Any other discussion? Discussion? I will say I'm excited for that bakery to be open again and creating that buzz, especially with the Deco project moving forward and things. So you have a great background as with the chamber and with downtown group back in the downtown, what was it called?
Well, they used to have
downtown
a shadow council in there on
yeah, the shadow council.
Saturday and Sunday mornings.
That's right.
You could
So
get in there and they'd tell you
Yeah.
what's going on.
So it's great to have that back up and running. So with that, by voice vote, Mr. Reynolds.
Ms. Contreras,
Aye.
Ms. Brennan,
Aye.
Mr. Lehman,
Negative.
Mr. Mars,
Aye.
President Whiting.
Aye, the motion passes 4-1. Congratulations, good luck.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors.
Next on our agenda is item 4B, an amendment to the Opus purchase agreement. Mr. Kursky.
Mr. President, board members, so this is an amendment, as you know, given the current economy, most real estate developers have been kind of put on pause because of the inability to get local financing. So Opus went out to market and did find, their agent found this group out of Boston that will step into their shoes. So Opus will still be in charge of the development, build the building for Cherney, but they will not own it. It will be owned by this partnership. This fund is about an $11 billion fund. They're one of the largest owners of industrial property in the U.S., so it's a feather in Shakopee's cap and in Opus's cap that they're going to make a major investment in Shakopee, and hopefully many more.
Questions of staff? Mr. Mars?
Mr. President, so this is more or less just assigning the tax abatement agreement to the new owner?
Mr. President, board members, it's signing the development agreement. The tax abatement agreement will stay with Cherney. They are the tenant and they are the beneficiary. This is actually allowing, we currently have a contract that was assignable from Opus because at that time, 2 years ago, they didn't know who would be in the ultimate development position. So they're assigning their purchase contract. The good news is we went through a lot of discussions with Opus on how they could slice and dice this project. The new owner is going to basically write the EDA a check and close on the entire property and pay all of the building permits and move this project forward immediately.
Mr. President, follow up, I read in your memo that Opus would still be involved in the marketing of the extra lot?
Mr. President, board members, so Opus will be doing the design and construction for the Cherney building, and they have an agreement with the new owner to stay on and build that speculative building. I think in the market, they're not prepared right now to take the risk on going and building a completely speculative building, and they're out shopping for tenants right now.
Mr. Lehman, or did you have a follow-up, Mr. Mars? Mr. Lehman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me see if I got this straight. Opus has a long-term contract with Churn, a long-term lease with Churn for use of a building that isn't built that Opus can't afford to build. So now we're getting somebody else involved to fund the building.
Mr. President, board members, we have nothing to do with this. So Opus had a lender in place, and then we had all the issues with COVID. The lenders had backed off on development, even with a credit tenant with a 15-year lease. So Opus went out and found basically a purchaser of the project that would be able to fund Cherney's building. So they will pass that lease on to the new owner. And so Opus will still design and build the building, make sure it comes in on budget, and manage the project. But the Cabot will be the new owner of the building who will be leasing to Cherney. And Cherney is with whom we have the tax abatement agreement.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
So if we don't do this, there will be no building. And what happens to the long-term lease between Opus and Churn if there's no building if we don't do this?
Mr. President, board members, it was thought at some point that Opus would either a subsidiary or assign this. So what you're basically doing is what you agreed to, I think, 2 or 2.5 years ago. You're assigning the purchase agreement to Cabot, who Opus has found as their partner. If you don't do this, you will not get your $1.65 million. Cherney will go away, and you'll be sitting on a vacant lot for a long time.
Does the abatement then just go away at that point?
Well, yes, because there would be nothing there to abate.
Okay.
It still would be tax exempt, and it would be sitting there.
Okay.
Any other questions? What are the wishes of the, go ahead, Mr. Mars.
Mr. President, I'll offer resolution number E2020-005 to amend the purchase agreement with Opus to assign the agreement to Cabot Industrial Fund number 6 Operating Partnership, Limited Partnership.
Second?
We have a motion and a second by Brennan. Any other discussion? Discussion, Mr. Reynolds?
Ms. Contreras?
Aye.
Ms. Brennan,
Aye.
Mr. Lehman,
Who?
Mr. Lehman,
Aye.
Mr. Mars,
Aye.
President Whiting.
Aye. The motion passed 5-0. Next item is 4C, an application for Economic Development Administration. Let's see, Mr. Kursky again.
On here, we'll get this up, so there it is.
I guess the rest of the title is in the memo. Economic Development Administration for the Innovation Center to be located on EDA-owned property on First Avenue in Atwood.
Good evening, Mr. President and board members. As some of you know, we've been working on this in conjunction with, excuse me, Scott County and Minnesota State University, Mankato, for about a year. It got kind of real back in April when an architect was hired, and they have gone through the plans, which these are the latest and greatest. These were completed last night. So this is the project site outlined in gray, and that actually is the River Bluff development. They were able to get the model from the developer, so that's kind of how that will look. This is a view from the roof. This is the first floor plan. So the main highlight here is the entrance will be off Atwood. There's kind of a very flexible grand room here in the front that has operable doors and windows. There's classrooms set up. We've worked very closely with Minnesota State University Mankato and their professors. They'll actually be moving some degree programs here, so you'll only be able to get them here in Shakopee. You'll see down in the corner here, there's some large bays. These would have overhead cranes, so they could do some of the manufacturing courses. The second floor has some additional, here's the two-story bays in this corner, and then this is another large workroom area for larger projects that our industry might be working on. And then it's on the exterior, there are classrooms, and then some smaller offices that would likely be used by the university for professors, and they're also talking about moving their small business development center here. Excuse me. And then this is the roof plan. More offices that could actually be used for small companies. We are going to hopefully be partnering with the First Stop Shop, their technology village in Prior Lake. Some of those tenants would potentially be moving here. So there's kind of general conference space and open space for people to meet. This is one of the first buildings, I think it's the second building in the country to be designed around some of the standards for COVID-19. So there's a lot more open space, and one of the big features is there are actually outdoor meeting rooms so that you can go out of these classrooms and have meetings outside. So all of the offices and spaces have all been designed to have social distancing, so no matter what's going on in the world, this building would be able to survive, along with much higher level air filtration systems, fresh air ability. And then also this will be one of the first buildings that'll have touchless, just about everything. The elevator would have no buttons. There are no doorknobs in this building. It's all designed around to have clean surfaces. They did design it with the potential for a photovoltaic array that actually could power a good portion of the building on the roof. And these are just some rough elevations. So this is the northernmost elevation. This is the entry elevation along Atwood. South elevation, this faces the alley. So it has multiple entrances. We will be using existing city parking lots to serve the building, so they did design it so that the occupants could enter from several locations. And this is the side that faces the existing small house that remains. And these are some early, they're still working on this. Our plan is, if this is approved tonight, is to submit next week. So they've been working around the clock on renderings and details so that we can submit a full plan to the Economic Development Administration. So this is a rendering from the northwest, and then this is a view from the southwest. So the building's about 37,000 square feet. So it's a pretty good sized building. The university has been very engaged and involved in the design and some of the equipment and other things that would go into the building. This building would also have the ability to have virtual events occur here. If I go back, one of the things that came up from some of the discussions was having a commercial kitchen. There are a lot of home-based people that want to produce food products. So one of the ideas was to put a commercial kitchen in here that they could use and rent out. Also, it could serve when there could be events here or ceremonies or whatever. And it also could be a teaching kitchen. The architects have a relationship with a international chef that's out of the Twin Cities. And so this potentially could have cameras, other audiovisual things where they could actually do demonstrations that could be broadcast out.
Thank you, Mr. Kersey. Can you go to the next slide, please? I guess it was the one that has the eastern property on it. Have we been in discussions with any of the adjacent property owners?
So, Mr. President, board members, we have talked to the owner of this house, and they have no interest in selling. They are well aware of this project. I've sent that actually in a certified letter to them.
The picture I was looking for kind of shows that it kind of the building eclipsing that house. And
Yeah, let's see, it might be the rendering. You can, yeah, the house is actually hidden back here, I believe. Yep.
yeah, it might have been one of your first slides that you put in. Yeah, that's kind of it. Is that any kind of a relevant shadow study of any kind, or?
Mr. President, board members, this really is the shadow study. It's going to be in the shadow. It's a 3-story building.
Right. Have in discussions with the pool company and all?
Mr. President, board members, we have had discussions with the pool company that really haven't gone anywhere. So,
Thank you. Any other questions? You want to get my screen
Yep.
back out? All right, there they are. Mr. Mars, go ahead.
Mr. President and staff, this is an application for full funding from the Federal Economic Development Authority.
Mr. President, board members, that's correct. They have a program currently where they can fund up to 100%. They will underwrite the project and come back with a proposal, but it's 80 to 100% of funding for construction.
Well, follow-up question? A couple of them. Obviously, Mankato State's on board with this, obviously, especially with the building and the layout. Is that correct?
Mr. President, board members, we already have a memorandum of understanding to work with them, and we actually suggested some programs. So one of the programs they're actually exploring is a program that's not offered anywhere in Minnesota, but it's a bachelor's in manufacturing sciences. So that's a pretty popular program in other states, and so we ship that off to them, and they actually have 3 of their lead science research and education faculty that are working on that program, and some of which would actually be in this facility.
Mark, go ahead.
And then, Mr. President, I appreciate that the comments about the commercial kitchen because of our entertainment and hospitality businesses in our community. And also I see an area, almost a quarter of the building for looks like a shop zone, right? With an overhead crane, and you show a car in there. Is that designed for the trade aspects of it?
Mr. President, board members, that's correct. So there are 2 two-story bays that would have cranes and actually are specially designed. They're isolated from the rest of the building, both from a foundation standpoint and a structural standpoint, so that any banging equipment, whatever that occurs in there, will not impact the rest of the building.
More?
No, not for me.
Any other questions? Mr. Lehman?
Thank you, President. What's the student capacity of this building?
Mr. President and board members, it depends whether that would be COVID or non-COVID. They had 2 layouts, one which it was pre-COVID, which had in the hundreds. I would say it's less than that now because of social distancing. But one of the things they have learned is that when they had to go remote, there were lots of issues, and so all of those issues have been designed in the building so that students locally will be able to attend here, and students that are remote, for instance, in Mankato, they'll actually broadcast those courses back to Mankato.
Mr. President, Is it safe to assume if it was originally 200 under COVID, it would be a minimum of, or a maximum of 100?
Mr. President, board members, not necessarily. I mean, they did open up the halls considerably, so they haven't reduced the capacity of the classrooms, if you'll look, but what they've done is actually cut down on some of the office space and made wider corridors. One of the issues that came up in the discussions with the EDA is they wanted a minimum of a 6 or 7 foot hallway, so all of the hallways are that on the upper floors. So it's not as efficient as a building as it would have been, say, 6 months ago.
Mr. President, I counted like 60 chairs out of the design, 60 students. So the question now is there multiple shifts for students?
Mr. President, board members, so this building is designed to be a 24-hour building, and one of their main focuses will be night courses. And so there's 2 types of classrooms here. Your old, what they call the old-fashioned seating arrangements. And I apologize that you don't have the latest plans, but literally they came late last night. They have a lot more of those on the first floor, and then on the second and third floor, they have what they call core curriculum classes, where it's people that work during the day that will work in groups of 4 or 5, and they'll be working on a specific core curriculum project for potentially a year. Classrooms are all on the second and third floor.
Okay.
And there's a lot of those.
Ms. Brennan, go ahead.
Are the spaces flexible so that the walls can be moved and created into new spaces?
Mr. President, board members, you'll, on the presentation I just gave you, they added that in. We've been having weekly meeting or bi-weekly meetings with the architect in the university, and so now on the first floor and on the second floor, those rooms are either small or very large. They have divisible walls. And same is true for the lab space. Those were designed to have everything overhead, so whether it was an engine they were bringing in or a large computer 3D printer, all of that could be serviced from power and lifts above, so there wouldn't have to be any changes to the actual floors.
Any other questions?
I'm assuming with being an innovation center that we would want to make sure that we have the up-to-date technology that's integrated into this facility.
Mr. President, board members, so we were fortunate enough to have probably one of the best international architects that does these in the world. Came on a team with they have a local office, but also there's a local architecture firm that partnered with them. And so they've been doing research on technology for these facilities for the past probably 5 or 6 years. They've built them in Chicago and China. They have budgeted a very robust number for technology for this building, including wiring the entire building with state-of-the-art high-capacity, low-voltage wiring so that every single room has the fastest possible internet access, the ability to plug and play whatever we could think of today, and then in whatever might come in the future, all of that's been put into the budget. So it's a fairly robust budget because there's probably $1 million in specialty equipment that they've kind of pre-budgeted into the building.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mars.
Mr. President, Michael, the application here, if we were to pass this tonight, tell us a little bit about the timeline.
Mr. President, board members, we will have a final package from the architects probably later this week, early next week. And then they've been working with HRNA, who's doing the facility feasibility study, updating large sections with what they've learned through the university process. That will all be submitted hopefully in the next couple of weeks to the EDA. They have a mandatory 60-day turnaround, and they've been looking for shovel-ready projects. So theoretically, 60 days from whenever we submit, they give us a thumbs up. It would probably take the architects 60 to 90 days to finish off the drawings. So you would probably see construction sometime next year.
And then more follow-up here. Actually, it was one of my questions is Minnesota DDOL on board on this about the educational opportunity and retraining if necessary? And
Mr. President, board members, that's a pretty big component. They were one of the early people that were spoken with as part of this project. There is no kind of high-tech advanced manufacturing center in Minnesota right now, so this will be a fairly attractive. And when we talk about kind of the next generation of manufacturing, it could be drugs, whatever. It's anything and everything. So I think particularly with what we've just gone through, you're going to see a lot more technology introduced, and there'll be a huge opportunity for training in this facility and also people actually getting degrees, which you can't currently get in this state.
We talked about at one point partnering with local companies in this endeavor to try and teach some of their employees and things, and there was some interest there. Now, with Mankato State and everybody jumping on, is there still going to be that possibility in application?
Mr. President, board members, there's actually been some outreach by Minnesota State Mankato to some of those industries, and I think there's a pretty high level of excitement, but I think they'll be more excited when they know it's really going to happen.
Right.
But they did have, that's one of the reasons why we ended up with those two really high bay spaces. Currently, Mankato is using some space in both Eden Prairie and Edina and Mankato, where they've had a lot of issues because it's retrofitted space. So their senior management staff have been involved a lot in the discussions on what's really needed and what mistakes they've made in other buildings and what they'd like to see in this building so that it has a 50 to 100-year life. So it's been a pretty robust discussion.
Okay.
And they will actually partner with all of the technical colleges they have agreements with, so that if they don't have the staff, they can reach out to Hennepin Tech or Normandale or any of the other technical colleges in the region.
Okay. Mr. Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. President. No disrespect, but there's no such thing as being in front of technology. It's constantly changing, and every day there's something new. I missed the part Mr. Kirsty's voice was not coming through when Mr. Mars asked about the 100% from the federal EDA, or it might be, I think I heard 80-20 or something. That's where the sound went away. Can you repeat that for me, please?
Mr. President, board members, so this program is either 80% or 100% of construction funding, and that includes all of the architecture and engineering and all the upfitting.
A follow-up, President?
Go ahead.
The 20%, if it came down to that, do we have stakeholders lined up to participate in that if it goes that route?
Mr. President, board members, we'll come back to you if it comes back at that. We'll know in 60 days, and then we will figure out how to resolve the 20%. We're going to ask for the 100%, and we've spoken with the case manager at the EDA, and that's what he's informed us to ask for. So we do have letters of support going in from several local organizations and some other people in the community, so that's another measure they use on moving these forward or not.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Mars.
If there's no other questions, Mr. President, I'll offer resolution E202006 to submit an application for the construction funding to the Federal Economic Development Administration for the Innovation Center to be located on the EDA property owned on First Avenue and Atwood.
A second?
A motion and a second by Brennan. Any other discussion?
I just want to say that I think this is going to be a great opportunity. We don't have higher education in Scott County. And then also the entrepreneurship aspect of it, we're creating small businesses. Well, we're not creating them, but we're giving the opportunity to create them. I think it's going to be great for this community and also this region.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Mars?
Yeah, I think to even get to this level, this position right here, this idea has been talked about for the last 5 years, and scale and the businesses and retention and Mankato State's partnership, a real opportunity to set us apart here in Shakopee and Scott County.
No, I agree. I think this is an exciting thing, and with all the technology going into it, I'm looking forward to hearing more. But Mr. Reynolds, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Contreras.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Lehman.
Aye.
Mars.
Aye.
President Whiting.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. All right, we'll wait for a few months, see what happens. Next on the agenda is item number 5. Mr. Mars?
Mr. President, I'll offer a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, July 7th, 2020 at 7 p.m.
And it's second by Brennan. Mr. Reynolds, would you call that roll, please?
Ms. Contreras.
Aye.
Ms. Brennan. Ms. Brennan.
Sorry. Aye.
Mr. Lehman.
Aye.
Mr. Mars.
Aye.
President Whiting.
Aye. We are adjourned.
We'll reconvene the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for our June 16th, 2020. We've just completed our EDA meeting, and we are moving ahead then to 10A1, Archaeologists Investigation of Memorial Park and Reroute Stormwater Project of Historic Sites. Steve.
Mayor and council members, good evening. Pleased to present this archaeological investigation presentation tonight. We had presented it to the Sioux community several months ago, and I'm glad we can finally get it on our schedule tonight. We do have a team that will be presenting via Zoom. We have our consultants from WSB. We have Jack Corkle online. We have John Perkins also with WSB. And then we have Steve Blonda, who is our archaeologist for this project. One quick update, so we'll be talking about the Memorial Bridge project, which has been around a little longer than me actually, and also the Amazon Drainage project, which has also been around longer than me. But with the Amazon Drainage project, and we'll get more of an update, we are substantially complete with that project, so we have bypassed the water around those Indian burial grounds as of now. So that project, in my mind, is successful at this point. And another note before I hand it over to the team here to present to you is we did not have any substantial archaeological discoveries through that project. So that is good as well. So without further ado, I think Jack Corkle will be up first, and I'll just hand it over to her, and I'm running the PowerPoint here.
Thank you, Steve. I believe there is a presentation that does go along with our information for this evening. If you could pull that up, I'd appreciate it. All right. So as Steve indicated, we're here to talk about the Amazon project as well as the Memorial Park Trail project. And I'll start and give an overview of the Memorial Park Trail Bridge replacement project. I'm going to give a little bit of background information for the project, what the improvements entail, and then I'm going to turn it over to Steve so he can talk about the archaeological investigation for this particular project. And then I'll wrap up a little bit in terms of the stakeholder involvement, our schedule moving forward, and the funding for the project. And then I will turn it over to John to talk about the Amazon project. So in terms of the background and the project purpose, there used to be a bridge that connected the Mound Park or the Memorial Park area across the backwater. And that connected into some of the DNR property and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife trails that are in that area between Chaska and Shakopee. There were some conditions that required the removal of the pedestrian bridge in 2016. It wasn't structurally sound. And so we needed to make sure that we are replacing that connection. As part of the funding that was received, we needed to do an archaeological survey and review, especially with the sensitive nature of the resources in the area. If you could do the next slide, please. Thank you. So this shows what the new improvements are. And I'm going to start us closer or away from the river, so closer to Highway 101. We have a new connection that we will be using to enter, and that's shown in the darker sort of black color on the aerial image. And that follows in part, thank you, in part, most of the existing trails that you see in the area. However, we did have to do some deviations As part of the archaeological investigation, there are some sensitive resources that we wish to make sure that we were avoiding. There were also some good trees in the area that have significant meaning that we were also working to avoid impacting. And then we located the alignment of the bridge to get across the river or the backwater part of the area. And the new trail will support pedestrian, bicycle, and snowmobile uses. So that's an overview of what the project will entail, and I'll let Steve talk about the archaeological investigation.
There we go. Can everybody hear me?
Yes?
Okay, thank you for having us. We did, Blondo Consulting completed the archaeological work out there. When I first heard about the Memorial Park project, I got very excited. I've been working down in that Shakopee area for a number of years now and had always wanted to do work in Memorial Park. It's kind of the jewel on the crown, I guess, or so I thought until I got to steel mounds over at the Amazon project. But the pond mounds, the area, of course, has been mapped as containing a mound group. It's identified, first recorded in 1882 by T.H. Lewis. He had gone around the whole state identifying mounds and recording those, and that's still a resource that we go back to even today, just to look at where these things were originally at. And so we knew that there were about 28 mounds originally identified in Memorial Park. And looking at where the trail was going to go, we knew we were getting close to some of these sensitive areas. And so we started consultation with stakeholders, the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, the Office of the State Archaeologist, and of course the Shakopee, Midwaukee, and Sioux community, city, and State Historic Preservation Office, and discussed what the plans were out there, what we wanted to do, and where we were going to be doing it. They suggested that the project start with geophysical studies, something like ground penetrating radar, magnetometry, resistivity, these different non-intrusive methods for testing what is there and getting an idea of just what may be below the ground. When a mound is constructed, it is, a lot of times, like the soil is prepared, it's an area that's dug out. Burials are then put in and soil, and eventually it forms the upright. So you have a circle with the ground surface through the center. So what is below the ground is also above the ground, or what's on earth is above in the sky. What's in the sky is on the ground, on the earth. And so even through the process of landscaping and development, you can flatten a mound and take that top off, but there can still be some subsurface remaining bits of the mound. So starting with the least intrusive, the ground penetrating radar, the geophysical studies, we can look at that, and then from there do soil coring with a 1-inch soil core, and then do shovel testing with a larger 1-foot hole, and kind of moving our way up. So if there is something there, we're not disturbing it. We did complete the geophysical studies with ground penetrating radar and with resistivity. There's the ground penetrating radar. The red circles are showing areas that are hot, I guess. They're areas where, for some reason, there's a difference in, it sends a signal down and bounces the signal back up, measuring that resistance, or the time it takes. So these are areas where there could be something of interest. And by taking this, and then I think, let's see if we got the next one, I think shows I hope, yes, there we go. There's the magnetic susceptibility, which is looking for magnetic, for areas of iron, or areas of again, just a resistance that's different. And if you look at where the mounds are mapped, which are the little circles, you can see that there are mounds in the reason why this is a weird shape. We only look at the trail corridor, but you can look at, and you can see that there are some areas. There's one over right above the yellow where it says 6 at that Y. There's a couple of known mounds right there. Those two little, yep, right in there. Those we know are mounds. You can still see them on the surface. We were given permission to go ahead and do the magnetic susceptibility right over the top. Then we've got a signature that we know that's what a mound looks like. And we can compare that to other areas. There are other areas on there that are red that look like hotspots, but they're not, they don't correspond to where the mounds were originally mapped at. And so they were of less concern. But we did then go through and test all of that with soil coring, just to look at what the soil looked like on a 5 meter or about 15-foot interval all the way across one side of the trail, and then on both sides of the trail. And then we came back through as well on kind of an in between those 5 meter on another 5 meter interval, and shovel tested, just digging a larger hole and looking, screening all of the soil and looking to see what was there. And found one area that we were a little concerned about, that the trail was going to go through, and there was a tree over there, and so we rerouted to kind of work around that area. But the area that we looked at was clear, and we were able to go ahead and recommend that the site, that the project move forward. Through working with in consultation with all these project partners, the state archaeologist who's in charge of overseeing compliance with Minnesota State Statute 30708, which is the Private Cemeteries Act, which protects cemeteries. She was able to feel confident and comfortable with what was being done out there. Also, the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council and Shakopee, who are also involved in Minnesota Indian Affairs Council is also involved with the 30708 project or process. So everyone was comfortable because they were invited to the table early on to see what we were doing and being kept aware of what we were doing. This is the LiDAR, which is it's a laser image that's shot down from a plane, and it goes through vegetation, and it shows highs and lows, and it shows like the how a light reflects off of topographic features. And this works really well for identifying mounds. You can see that you can also then shade it from different angles, so the sun hits it from different angles and you can see different things. But you see those the 1, 2, 3, 5 big mounds. Those are the ones that the goats were out on earlier this year. Those are those big ones, and they are as clear as day that those are there. You can also see a lot of the trails, the parking lots. Those are all showing up. But if you look really close at these, you can and play with the lighting, which is what our sub-consultant did for us. He was able to identify that there were above ground features or above ground expressions of some of these other mounds that were mapped out there. The connected, another interesting thing, there's 5 of them that are connected down there. That's a really rare feature of mounds. You don't see that in the state of Minnesota. The yellow ones here are the ones that still have an above ground expression, but those right there are a very unique feature in the state of Minnesota that is here at the site. So very interesting, very exciting to see. Do I have another slide? Yes, there we go. So we did 100 shovel tests, and 48 of which were positive for cultural material. Not uncommon. There's been a lot of use of this site. We did find evidence of that with modern artifacts, everything from the trash that people leave out in the park that gets buried, to modern artifacts, nails and things from the farming and things that had happened there, animal bone fragments, and then of course some pre-contact artifacts. There were lithic stone tools, or pieces left over from the manufacture of stone tools, and ceramics, which they had from potsherds and things like that. There was also one possible human bone fragment. So when we found bone, what we did is we would take photos and video, excuse me, and send that over to the Hamlin Osteological Laboratory, where osteologists and bioarchaeologists would take a look at what was there. If they had any questions, we would bring it over, and they were working as our temporary repository, holding on to all of the material, not knowing if we had things that came out of if they were cemetery related or not, because we're working in a cemetery. And so they were able to identify, and there was one piece that just wasn't quite identifiable or not identifiable, and so they end up saying possible human bone, and you treat it as though it were human. And so so we do have evidence that there is stuff there, that there is cemetery there. The past work in that area in the 1940s, Lloyd Wilford from the University of Minnesota recorded that site or visited the site. In the 1970s, there was extensive landscaping going on that the park was doing, and they turned up they ended up going through with heavy equipment through a number of burials that were out there, and seeing the archaeologists that showed up identified human remains strewn about, beads and a number of trade goods and things, and just strewn about the whole area where these mounds had been hit. In 1993, they did another study to see how many mounds still existed. Same in 2001, 2001, 2002, 2003. Electric line project in 2011, and then finally us in 2019. Of the 28 mounds that were originally recorded out there, let's see if the next slide maybe says that. Here's the, yep, so we minimized the efforts. There's the notebook from T.H. Lewis recording these in 1882. We're going to be doing some archaeological and or tribal monitoring during construction, but no further work is expected out there. Don't know if I have the slide that says, but of the 28 mounds, Steve, do you want to see if the next one maybe says the final? I may have to save that for you, but I know it's at the end of the presentation. So there's there's all the shovel testing that we did and the soil coring that we did along the alignment, and what we found and where we found it. But we've minimized to the extent practical the alignment, adjusting it to avoid those sensitive areas. So that's the memorial park from the archaeological side of things. I think that's all of my, yep, there we go. Oh, there's everybody that was involved. Of course, MnDOT as well, and DNR. But working under those two state statutes and Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. Private Cemeteries Act just it prevents disturbance of cemeteries, including burial mounds. Field Archaeology Act and Historic Sites Act, Minnesota 138, just states that if you're on public land using public money, that archaeological work needs to be completed before a project takes place. And then, of course, 106, which is the federal law. If you're on federal property, if you're on using federal money or federal permitting, you need to make sure that the agency needs to make sure that any work complies with protection of cultural resources, identification and possible and protection of resources. So that's more than you guys needed to know about the pond mount site. So I'll turn it back over to, go ahead, Jack, or yeah, do you want to, or Steve, do you want to cover this?
I can take it. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate the summary of all the archaeological work that has been done. In terms of the project, I think, Steve, if you could go back one to the schedule, or did that get out of order? That's all right. I can talk about the funding sources first. That's fine. Okay. Thank you. In terms of the schedule, we are still waiting for our final clearance for the federal process from SHPO. We had anticipated getting a letter back from them approximately 2 weeks ago. We've done some follow-up with them. They indicated they need another couple of weeks, and we hope to have something by the end of this week. Once we get SHPO's clearance on this, and then we obtain the final state clearances, we should be able to wrap up the environmental investigations. So that should be wrapping up yet this summer. Our construction plans are pretty much ready to go, as Steve indicated at the beginning of this process, or this presentation. We just want to make sure that we do have that clearance, that we're not impacting any areas that are of concern before we finalize those out. So that will follow shortly after we get the environmental clearances that we are still seeking, with the project letting this fall and with construction happening over the fall and into the summer. In terms of funding, as we had indicated earlier, the city of Shakopee is the primary funding source from the local agency perspective, but there's been also some other regional and local contributions from Scott County, as well as the Sioux community. And then the largest source of funding did come from the DNR from 2 grants that the city happened to receive. And I guess with that, Steve, would you like to move on to the Amazon project, or would you like us to answer any questions about this one?
Questions of our presenters back on the mounds and the Memorial Park. The scope of your study was just around the trail aspect and that, right? Did it include the entire grounds?
No, the LiDAR did cover most of that. The LiDAR study did cover the entire park. There are mounds outside of that trail area. But we really were, the geophysical study is really the best way to get a view of exactly what's out there. And we were concentrating that just on the trail alignment, a little bit on each side of it, but just on the trail. I know there's some plans down the line for doing some removal of bits and pieces in the park, and that will all potentially affect mounds and things that could still be there. This is one of those things where I've heard stories about Memorial Park since I started working in doing archaeology in Shakopee, and things like there were areas that there's a lot of mound-looking things, hills and things in that park when you're out there, just natural, like the topography of the park. And what we kind of found was that some of those may have an anomaly, a geophysical anomaly that we can't identify because it's outside of and it's not overlain with a mapped mound. But there's others that were kind of, everyone was insistent that might be a mound, and it doesn't have a geophysical signature. So it's really hard to say what you see above ground, if it is or if it isn't. And then what you don't see, a lot of times there can still be something underground. So it's amazing how much of that site is still exists, I guess. But to answer your question, I'm sorry, we really just focused on just the trails.
Yep. No, and that's why I asked the question, because we have a park and trail master plan, and the Memorial Park has become part of that. Obviously, we're talking about the removal of the playground and some other things because of the potential burial grounds that might be all over this area. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
I know that. Oh, yeah.
Councilors?
Right here.
Councilor Lehman?
Thank you. Question I have is, can we identify which might be Native American and which might be early settler areas?
Quick answer on that one, it really overlaps, and bear with me, we're going to talk about the National Register process, and I'll when we get to that, after we talk about Amazon project, then I think I can answer your question about that with there's a big overlap between they're not necessarily associated with early settlers, and a lot of what has happened out there has been just overlap and just kind of constant reuse of the same piece of property. But I think there is a connection, and I'll get more into that in a few. So if you can bear with me on that one, Councilman Lehman.
Thank you. Other questions, and we'll move on to the second part of this, and there'll probably be some more information on remains and status of. Thank you. Proceed.
John, you should be up.
Okay. I'll talk about the Amazon project. My name is John Perkins, and I'm a project engineer with WSB, and I worked on this Amazon stormwater project. So why are we doing this project, this work? Currently, the Amazon Fulfillment Center on 101 discharges all their ponds and most of their runoff north and a couple pipes underneath 101 towards the Minnesota River. And just on the north side of 101, there are a bunch of mounds and cultural resources that this water is eroding away. So, the picture here shown on the right is a temporary solution that was come up with several years ago, just to kind of slow down this erosion and give us more time to figure out a more permanent solution on how to fix the problem and figure out what we're going to do with the water from Amazon. Good. So this was the proposed solution. As you can see in the picture here, Amazon is on the bottom left. The pipes directly north underneath 101, that's where their water goes today. And there are a number of mounds in the woods there, and also the Landing Park as well, some other buildings up in that direction. So our proposed solution was to remove the pipe under westbound 101 and block that flow off, and then add a new pipe down the median of 101 and direct the water all the way down to the eastern side of the landing. There's an existing ravine or ditch that goes right down to the Minnesota River. So basically we're going to redirect or reroute all of Amazon's runoff down the median and to the Minnesota River where it currently goes today. And on top of that, we're improving the ravine in that area now. I think before this project, it was just kind of gravel and just kind of honestly flat in some areas and wooded, but we added quite a bit of rock and stabilization to make sure that there wouldn't be any erosion in this ravine. And similar to the Memorial Park project, we had Blondo out here doing the same type of archaeological work to kind of investigate what was in the area. We used T.H. Lewis's mound survey that he mentioned, as well as the geophysical ground radar survey. And he did quite a few shovel tests. I think he did over 150 along the stretch. You can go to the next slide. This kind of goes through what shovel tests were done. We only found some non-human bone fragments, one potential human one, some lithic, and various other historical artifacts similar to Memorial Park. I don't think we had as high of a percentage of shovel tests that had artifacts or potential artifacts found in them, but I will say that nothing significant was encountered along the alignment of the pipe. You can go to the next slide. So this is kind of an overview of all the mounds in this area. You can see all those colored circles and ovals. Those are all mounds that were mapped by T.H. Lewis. And the red line, if you can see that, is the alignment of our proposed pipe down the center of 101. And all those shovel tests I referenced, we did along the alignment of the pipe every 5 meters. So I think this pipe length was like 3,000 feet. So that was quite a few shovel tests that Blondo did. Go to the next slide.
You can, I was gonna say, you can see that original alignment, John, that you guys came up with, it goes through where these again are where those mapped mounds were at. And so there was concern because there are mapped mounds in that, within the median of 101. where we were going to be going. And so not knowing if there was still intact or how much had been destroyed with the construction of 101, there's really no way to avoid. And I know that was a lot of the initial discussion was, where can we put this? And just getting across 101 and getting over there is virtually impossible if you have to, if there's still stuff there. So it was very important to look at. And as you said, the geophysics results really showed what was not still existent and where areas of concern still were. So
I think we do have a picture of the geophysics, like in some of your slides, Stephen, so everyone can kind of see what the results were from that. Over the course of all those shovel tests, we actually did find one that could potentially be an issue, that was the edge of a mound, potentially that was still intact. So we shifted our storm sewer alignment, is kind of shifting it more to the east to kind of make sure we skirted around this and just to be absolutely sure we didn't impact anything. But that was the only improvement we really need to make, as Stephen said. We kind of got lucky and avoided the majority of those mounds. And then this project actually has been under construction currently. They started at the end of April. And over the course of construction, they're actually nearly done. I think they should be done potentially this week. They didn't find any significant artifacts. A member of Blonda's team was out there pretty much the entire time they were moving dirt around and excavating to make sure that, you know, we didn't see anything. Nothing weird showed up in any dirt. There were no other artifacts, and we didn't find anything. The picture on the last slide was all the rock and stabilization we add to the ravine going down the Minnesota River. And then this is a couple pictures of some of the storm sewer installation we did. There's actually quite a bit of bedrock pretty close to the surface. In some instances, it was like 6 inches below the surface. So they kind of had to jackhammer their way through it to install the pipe in some areas. That's what the picture on the left is. You can go to the next slide. And another big element that we had to tackle with this project was a sanitary force main. And that's what this is showing here. It's actually a 16-inch diameter sanitary force main, which basically serves, as far as I understand, a lot of downtown Shakopee. So that's pressurized sanitary flow that's in that pipe, and we were unfortunately going to hit it with our storm sewer, and we knew about it before we started digging. So we just had to install an offset, which is just like a bend to get the pressurized pipe underneath our storm sewer. And as far as what steps are left, we're almost done with construction. Hopefully this week we'll be done, and I'll let Stephen talk about completing the listing of both these pond and steel mounds in the National Register of Historic Places.
I think, the next slide, I think, there we go. So part of the grant project from MHS, from the Minnesota Historical Society that the city received was to list both the pond and the steel mounds. So the mounds at Memorial Park are the pond mounds, and the steel mounds, which are on the Amazon project, to get both of them listed on the National Register of Historic Places. To nominate and list something on the National Register, this is kind of the who's who of historic properties. It's been in place since 1969 and has really been, it's been focused a lot on buildings. You'll see a lot of those historic buildings. You guys have a few in Shakopee that are listed on the National Register because they're important. They have significance, and there's 4 measures of significance, those 4 criterion. A, B, C, and D for association with historic events, important people, design style, and a potential to yield information. And then they must have integrity, integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. In other words, it needs to be something that's important, historically important, and it needs to still look and feel historic. So archaeological sites a lot of times fall under that criteria D with the potential to yield information. about our past or have yielded information about our past. That's a really weird thing to say about mounds. We have not scientifically dug into a mound for purely interest in educational reasons. As archaeologists, we haven't dug into one since 1974. They're protected in the state of Minnesota, and yet there still is a lot of information that they can yield, especially now with the new technology of things like using LiDAR, using geophysics and non-intrusive methods of testing to see what's there. But they also have an association with historic events, and there is a design and a style to the mounds. So we are looking, so we're working on these National Register for both sites. I think the next slide, I hope. There we go. So currently there's very few mound sites that are actually even listed and a very few archaeological sites. We identify a lot, but we rarely list them on the National Register. But this is a way of acknowledging their significance within local, state, and national historic context. And there is a protection factor. So when state or federal projects could potentially affect a property, if it's listed on the National Register, there is kind of a level of protection. There's access to grant funds for future work. If you wanted to go after a grant because you have a property listed on the register, it opens up some doors to funding. And there's also a history and understanding of properties over time, especially historic impacts to these properties. This is kind of this is a really big deal to get these listed on the register, and they're very significant. I think the next slide will actually see. Here we go. So the pond mounds, I think I've talked about some of this, recorded in 1882 by T.H. Lewis, 28 mounds. Previous assessments, all those previous assessments, the folks that have been out there before us, they kept assuming that there were probably 8 to 11 of the 28 that were still there. And actually these numbers, I've updated these numbers now, guys. The intact mounds that are fully intact with a surface expression of the 28, we actually have 11 of them that we can account for as being intact. There's probably another 9 that have a subsurface only, and there's 8 of them that we don't know. We can't, but as far as we can tell, nothing is gone from out there, which is really exciting. But 11 intact of 28, that's a third of them that still look and feel like they did when they were constructed. They're actually, both of these sites, there's mounds that go from basically the western side of Memorial Park all the way down to Valley Fair and on. That was one large group of mounds. There's probably over 200 mounds in that just along there. We've arbitrarily divided those up into sites, but they're actually mentioned in some of the historic writings. There are folks that come up, Major Stephen Long comes up with an expedition up the Minnesota River, meets Shakopee in the village, which is in this Memorial Park area. That's in 1823. And one of the folks that's with him says there were just a series of mounds along the river throughout there. And it just looks like one big long parapet, one big mountain chain of mounds that are there. And so there's actually historic accounts of these mounds, which is also very important and adds to the significance. So I think let's look at the next, I think the next slide should talk about steel. So there's the pond mounds again with the geophysics work that we've done, where they are, where the trail's going in. Next slide, please. The steel mounds. So these are the ones that are down at the landing, and the ones that were impacted by the water runoff that started this whole project. They were mapped again in 1882, recorded as 111 individual mounds. Because the highway was going to get expanded in 1964, Eldon Johnson with the University of Minnesota brought students out. They mapped 21 and excavated 17 mounds, and found human remains and found all kinds of, they found grave goods and things. They found about, I think there's an estimate of like 58 individuals that they could account for in their excavations that they did of 17 mounds. And some of the information that, again, this is that criteria D yielding information, but it actually showed that there was continuous use of these mounds from, we believe they were probably constructed somewhere around 500 BC to 1650 AD, somewhere in maybe 700, if you split the difference, 700 to 1,000 BC. So it's, I went the wrong way. Let me go the other way. Somewhere around probably about 3,000 years ago, that they may have been constructed, 3,000 years ago. But they've been continuously used, and evidence that they were used all the way up into the historic Dakota, with some intrusive burials with trade goods and things. So Shakopee, who's living there at the village, when Samuel Pond comes out with his mission, and talks about seeing the mounds and the scaffolds and the burials out there, they're still using these mounds at that point in time, and until they leave in 1858, and leave the area. So there's not only this long history of mounds, but also a connection to the current Dakota, which is wonderful, and adds significance to the site. Of the 111 mounds, previous assessments really weren't real positive with how many still existed. Our work out there, again, I've got updated numbers. We've got 21 of the 111 that are intact with a surface expression that you can still see look like a mound. 31 mounds on top of that just have a subsurface existent. 46 of them are unknown, we're not sure, and 13 are non-existent. So 13 that are gone out of 111 is the mound group's still batting pretty good for integrity, and that's what we need for the National Register. So we've got a second draft. It's a series of nominations. You basically put together a very long and detailed account of the significance and the integrity, telling the whole historical narrative of what happened out there and what's happened, what it's associated with and why it's significant. You submit that to the state. They review it. They send you comments and edits. You go back and you address those comments and edits. You try and track down more folks to help you with or look for more resources and references and sources. Some of that's been very difficult given COVID. We haven't been able to get into libraries and historical societies or reach out to some of the folks in the tribal community that we've been trying to incorporate in. But it's just a series. We've got it down to a second version to go in now that's been updated, that will get submitted, and then likely there will be another round of edits. And essentially what you're trying to do is make sure that that finished product is so kind of perfect that the state review board and the keeper of the National Register will sign off on and ensure that this will go through. You don't want any hiccups or questions. And so that's what we're trying to get to. But very important, very exciting sites and projects. And thank you for letting me be part of it. And I think there's that, yep, where those mounds are currently at, or where they were mapped at, excuse me. And again, there's that grayish, whitish, bluish color underneath is the geophysics, which if we were zooming in, you'd see that there's still some anomalies that overlay with some of the mounds. And that was some of what we were looking at and avoiding. Again, that list of stakeholders, everybody that helped out on the project and worked with us on this. And again, just much like that pond site, you want to work on this stuff as early as possible and get everybody involved as early as possible, which we did, and move ahead from there. And so there weren't a lot of surprises. Everybody was very positive response about getting this done. So.
And then maybe I can take the project funding slide here and then open it up for further questions. The project funding was through multiple sources. The City of Shakopee. We did receive a substantial grant through the Minnesota Historical Society. I think it was about $366,000. Scott County, SMSC also were partners in this. as well as the Lower Minnesota River Watershed District. So we had a large group of funding partners, as well as on the previous slide, a lot of stakeholders. And we had many meetings with all these different entities and multiple people from all these different entities over the past few years. So culminating in getting the project done. And then as Stephen Blondo indicated, our goals to register on the National Historical Preservation List. And with that, we will open it up for any last comments, questions.
Questions of the presenters or of staff? I've seen this presentation before, and it's very telling about Mounds and where this stuff is. Councilor Lehman.
Mr. Mayor, I asked a question earlier that Mr. Blondo said he'd get back to, so I'll ask it again. Can we identify native mounds to early settler mounds?
Sure, thank you. I'm sorry, I was I did promise to get back to, and I appreciate you bringing that back as a question. Areas where early settlers had lived, we can tell. Early settlers are not do not use mounds, as far as we can tell. We've never found evidence of that anywhere. And so the mounds that we have identified are clearly native mounds, Indian mounds. And so as close to settlers as we can get are those accounts of contact era missionaries and things, and historic Dakota use of those mounds. So Shakopee's village, Little Six's village, it's documented that they're used, but they're used by native, not by Euro-American.
Let me follow up.
Sure.
The reason I ask is because we know there's settlers in the area. We know there's cemeteries. So obviously we have settlers buried in this area.
Yep.
Have we identified those also so that we're protecting their burial?
There were not identified, those areas were not identified in this project in this area. Those would be questions I know that I worked with the Historical Society previously on a project. It'd be a good follow-up question for the Historical Society, or something that the city could pursue to identify where those cemeteries and early burials are at. But there were no early settler burials identified in this project area.
But we're assuming they exist, correct?
Oh yes, oh yes. And they likely in single graves or in cemeteries, but not in mounds. And so we really were looking at the mounds that were within these areas.
I would assume it's equally disrespectful to build over top of a settler's grave as it is a mound.
I would agree. That becomes a personal thing, but I would agree with that. And they are also protected under that state law. If they're outside of if any cemetery, any burial that's outside of a platted cemetery, is protected under state law, under that Minnesota Private Cemeteries Act. It protects both native and non-native burials, and it really turns if there is a Euro-American and non-native burial, let's say that during construction of the highway you find a burial on the side of the road, that's something that the state archaeologist then takes management of and takes responsibility for managing. If it's determined to be Native American, then the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council takes over and manages that. So this project, we worked closely with both, but Minnesota Indian Affairs Council really had the say in what was being done, and Shakopee kind of working as the lead tribe, if you will, because it's in their backyard, and so they can work with us on it. And so it's just kind of knowing your project players and to successfully get your project done. But yes, they are also protected under state law.
Last question.
Yes,
my last question is the new trail alignment that you came up with all your testing. how do we know if that new trail alignment is on top of a gravesite?
Through so a gravesite looks different. If you think about digging a hole and putting dirt back in, you have a matrix, which is your soil. That's the intact soil, and then you would have you would disturb soil when you put it back in. It's not going to be as compact as it originally was. It might be mixed in. There may be other things mixed into it, and so doing the geophysical survey along there, we were able to look for anomalies that were below ground, and also through the shovel testing and the tight interval of every 15 foot makes it. It's possible we missed something, but it makes it a little more unlikely because that's a much closer look at the soils. And so we look at the soils, we look to see if anything looks disturbed, and through all of that testing, there was no suggestion that there were any settler or non-settler burials or grave sites that were within that trail alignment. But that's also why we then monitor construction, is because then we can look for and we can watch for as the trail is constructed, just like we did along the Amazon stormwater line.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, go ahead.
I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
I just said, okay, thanks.
Okay.
Other comments, questions on this? At least, I know we're talking about the new bridge and the fixing the stormwater runoff. I find this very enriching and very sensitive. The historic history of it is fascinating to me. And then I look at the swath of it all and go, wow. I know we've been talking about our culture corridor, and I really like the amount of collaboration that we had. We had a lot of stakeholders. This is kind of beyond the funding aspect. There's a lot of stakeholders that are interested in this, and I appreciate that. I certainly hope we can get on the register in the future. I think it's important, and from that aspect. Other questions, comments? Okay. Okay. No other comments? To our presenters, thank you very much. We do appreciate it. Staff, any closing comments at all?
Just thanks for John, Jack, and Stephen for these years of sticking with this project, and hopefully we can deliver the Memorial Bridge project as well over the next year.
Snowmobile Club will like that.
Yeah. Thank you all very much then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Moving ahead then to item 10B1, amendment to a planned unit development in District Number 2, Powers PUD, preliminary and final plat of Powers Second Edition, and Michael will present. We'll give staff a minute here to.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is the preliminary and final plat of Powers Second Edition amendment of the Planned Unit Development Number 2, the Powers Planned Unit Development. Earlier this evening, you abandoned the easements that were there, so this is now putting them back. So here is the Second Edition site. This is the new plan. So the major changes to this plan is that Lusitano has been relocated now, and excuse me, the county and city engineering and MnDOT work together on locating where Lusitano Street will come out now. So it's about at the midway point between 17th Avenue and the on-ramps. So the developer and its engineers worked to locate this as a right-in, right-out. It now serves the VA that's in for permitting. And then as part of this, you'll also see a PUD amendment adding in this new apartment building on the corner. So this is the overall landscape plan. Additional plantings have been provided along the east side of Lusitano Street, along the east side of the proposed dog park, as was recommended by the Planning Commission. So that green highlighted area is the proposed new dog park. So the developer, as part of this project, would be donating that parcel of land along with funding to construct that dog park. So as the Parks Master Plan identified this portion of town as a location for a second dog park. So that would be 1 acre for large dogs and 1 acre for small dogs. So this would be the preliminary plat. This establishes the existing block 1, the new lot 1, and the new lot 2. And so this is the final plat. So there's the new right-of-way that will be dedicated for Lusitano, and the outlot, which would be the stormwater detention basin and the new city park. So Trident Development is proposing their second phase here. The property is approximately 13.53 acres. You all approved the first part in December of 2019. At this time, they're proposing construction of the 15,000 square foot VA clinic and a 16,000 square foot medical building, which is only in concept, along with a 138 unit apartment building. So here's the apartment site plan, 138 units. This is the rough layout. And here are the elevations, all of which meet the city standards. And here's some computer models, kind of how the building will sit on the site. Again, these are all market rate units. There are some amenities for the project. There's an outdoor plaza. And then as you get into the building, there is also a plaza on the roof that'll have some pretty spectacular views. So the apartment building is 48, the PUD is a 48 foot 8-inch tall with a 4 and 12 roof pitch. Those are slightly different than our standard requirements. We work with the developer to get a lower roof pitch because this is a building right in the corner, so it wouldn't be quite as dominating in the area. Lusitano will be a right-in, right-out on Marystown Road. The developer will provide funds for the construction of the future trail along the property frontage on Marystown Road, and the extension of sidewalks on Lusitano to the proposed Marystown Road Trail must also be included in the development. And again, additional landscaping and sidewalk connections are conditions of approval, as are the park dedication fees, which will be utilized for the dog park and open space amenities. And the developer is also here to answer any questions.
Question of staff? So I have some questions in regard to this. So this is really just for the VA and the apartment building at this time, right?
Mayor and Council, you've already approved the VA. The change tonight is that the road actually will run across the front of it, which gives them better access. And then you're approving the apartment building tonight. The applicant will come back later for the medical office building. They're still working on the plans for that.
And the issue of the right-in, right-out's been resolved via the city, the county, and MnDOT, correct?
Mayor and Council, that's correct.
Okay, and then in the narrative, it talks about roundabouts on 17th and Marystown. Given the development patterns and current building and future buildings, when would we see the roundabout being developed?
Mayor and Council, the City Engineering Department is completing a roundabout study right now, but they have given us adequate right-of-way for the roundabout at 17th and Marystown.
Yeah. Other questions of staff? Other questions of staff? Does the applicant here want to make any comment? Okay. Councilor Whiting?
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution R 2020-079, a resolution approving the preliminary and final plat of Powers Second Edition, and approve ordinance number 02020-004, an ordinance approving an amendment of a planned unit development district number 2 for property located north of 17th Avenue and County State Aid Highway 16, east of Marystown Road, County State Aid Highway 15, and west of Jackson Elementary School, and move its adoption.
A second?
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? I guess I have one last question before this goes to the dogs. I see that there's a proposed dog park on the east side that would be open to the public in the end? Yes. Yep. A new dog park. Excellent. We're still waiting for the cat association to come before this council. And they want their own area. They meow about it all the time. Further questions on this PUD? Further discussion? By voice vote then, Mr. Reynolds?
Counselor Contreras.
Aye.
Counselor Brennan.
Aye.
Counselor Whiting.
Aye.
Counselor Lehman.
Negative.
Mars.
Aye. This motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much. Let's move ahead then to 10C1, our monthly financial review. Nate, welcome.
Thank you. I'll come down here. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Nate Reinhardt, Finance Director for the city. I have included the monthly financial report and review of the COVID-19 financial impacts within the council packet. I have just one slide on the general fund, and the rest will focus on the COVID-19 impacts. Oh, there we go. This slide shows the general fund through May. I'll touch on the variances that are 10% or more of budget, which are the red arrows or indicated by the red arrows. Starting with revenues, taxes and special assessments remain below budget targets until we receive our property tax settlements. We will receive our first half property tax settlement on Friday. Intergovernmental revenues, most of that will be received in fall. And then charges for services include community center and recreation revenues, which have been impacted by COVID-19 impacts and the community center being shut down. On the expenditure side, the variances are mainly a result of timing differences as well. Finance includes the beginning of the year payments for audit and assessing contracts. And then natural resources include the spring tree pruning. Overall, we're at 37% for expenditures, which is in line with our budget expectations.
Questions on this slide at all?
I have a question.
Councilor Lehman?
The special assessments, I don't believe I've ever seen it at 389% negative. Is that because the first half taxes have the assessments on them and that number comes down when the first half is received?
Yeah, so this has been similar to what you've seen in the past. This account is negative until we receive our first and our second half payments. We end up paying Republic Services for the delinquent garbage, and then we assess those and we receive the funds, and it reimburses that negative amount.
Does that answer your question, Counselor?
Yeah, it does.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions on that slide, thanks, Nate. Proceed.
Sure. As you're aware, we have tracking codes for invoices and timesheets to assist in identifying costs related to COVID-19. The summarized data on this slide is what has been coded to those tracking codes as of May 31st. We've identified approximately 348,000. About 66,000 were refunds through May for the community center, ice arena, and recreation programming. About 165,000 for paid leave for those unable to come to work or work from home, and 109,000 for personal costs related to COVID-19, such as public safety coverage, planning, and coordinating. Just a couple of notes regarding this data. Refunds will be duplicated when we look at the revenue comparison charts, as it's more of a revenue impact than an expense impact. And then most personnel costs would have occurred absence of COVID-19. However, the figures represent the time spent outside typical responsibilities. So if you take those into consideration, those couple of notes, you'll see the expenses are very minimally impacted. It's mostly on the revenue side. Through May of 2020, we are seeing an increase in the number of building permits, up to 1,881 from 1,766. And we're also seeing an equal number of single-family housing starts at 56. Through May, we were at 42% of the 2020 budget for building permit revenue. We think, knowing that there will probably be a couple of large permits coming this summer, that we're on pace to meet our budget expectations despite COVID-19. The most significant impacts are in terms of our park and recreation revenues. Parks and recreation revenues are down approximately $467,000 from 2019 through May. May revenues include those $66,000 of reductions for refunds that were processed on the identified cost slides. There have been some offsetting costs related to reductions in part-time and seasonal staffing, operating supplies, utilities, and cleaning services. But net amount of those expenses were at about $387,000 through the end of last month in comparison with 2019. For lodging tax, the city serves as the pass-through through the Visitors Bureau. We retain only 5%. Through May, we were $35,000 below what we saw last year. Based on council approval to prorate the liquor sale licenses, we'll see a $37,000 decrease in that revenue. We did receive a $50,000 voluntary tribal contribution for 2020. We're unsure at this point if we'll receive the remainder. That would have been a total of $150,000. And then I did receive our property tax settlement numbers today. We'll actually receive the settlement on Friday, but the numbers I received from the county today. If you take the percentage we'll receive in comparison with our levy and compared it to last year, we're about 2% less of a percentage of total levy. So about 2% under what we saw last year in terms of percentage of total collection or total levy. That amounts to about $200,000, so not necessarily a significant impact at this point. And knowing the county allowed for some certain circumstances to delay the property tax payments, we're really not seeing too much of an impact on our cash flow as a result of it. And then I just have one more slide here, just a quick update. State potentially distributing coronavirus relief funds to cities. The bill introduced that the Senate would distribute $841 million of federal funds to cities, counties, and townships for pandemic-related expenses. The distribution is based on population, $75.34 per capita, and it would be provided by June 30th. The total amount the city would receive is $3.1 million. There is guidance from the U.S. Treasury on how the money can be used. However, any unused funds must be returned. And Shakopee, along with many other cities, are currently determining what those funds can be used for and interpreting that guidance. So stay tuned if we do receive that money.
Mr. Reynolds.
Just an update on that bill. It did pass the Senate today, and we're waiting, as of a couple hours ago, to see when it was going to be scheduled for a House vote.
Questions of Nate? Councilor Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. If I'm reading this right, we have $348,000 worth of identified COVID cost, and we have $387,000 worth of lost COVID revenue. Am I reading this correct?
Yeah, I would say yes, with the one exception being we're duplicating our refunds in both places. So that amount less the $65,000.
Okay. And obviously it's still ongoing. So these are a snapshot, not current or moving forward either.
Right.
That's all I had, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Other questions of, and so the CARES Act dollars, in discussion with, Mr. Reynolds, other mayors, and the governor last week, that, those dollars are to be used for true noted COVID-19 expenses and not the loss of any revenue, right?
That is correct, yeah. It's more focused on the expenditure side of the equation, so.
All right. Any other questions on this? If not, thank you, Nate. Always enjoy your report.
Me too. Thank you.
Let's move ahead then, actually, to 10D1, Park and Rec under COVID update. Jay, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is an opportunity for me to say thank you for standing behind the department. It's been an exciting Mr. Toad's wild ride since March 17th as we've tried to figure out how do we meet the needs of our community when we are a people-facing service, but we're not allowed to be with people. And I think our staff has done an incredible job of finding some creative solutions. If you haven't seen it online, I'd encourage you to check out Shakopee Rec at Home, which has been a success. It's Shakopee Rec at Home. And it's on the Facebook site, on our social media sites. We promoted a couple things. We've had to figure out how to do virtual recreation, which has not been one of our main ways of meeting our constituency. An example of a success would be the Wheelies event that's been an annual event for many years in this city. We did virtually about 2 weeks ago as a week, and we used it as an opportunity to educate the public on bicycle safety, to encourage them to get out and explore the community in a scavenger hunt, check out trails and check out our spaces. It was also an opportunity for us to partner with some of our stakeholders in the community. So we've traditionally done a bike auction. We couldn't really do that. So we identified some of the best bikes that the police department had traditionally confiscated or found. And we were able to partner with Paul's Bike Shop downtown, and he fixed 5 of these bikes up. We also partnered with the JCs, and they provided some other things. And as part of the scavenger hunt and these other activities, if people would send a picture of themselves doing what they were doing, they were entered for a raffle. And on Friday, we raffled off 5 great bikes, gave 5 bikes to kids in the community, bicycle helmets, and other materials. So that's one example. We did something similar last week for water safety in the land of 10,000 lakes. How do you keep people safe near the water if you can't teach swimming lessons? We did it virtually last week, and I think the aquatics department did a fantastic. This week it's kind of crazy if you check it out. Today's video was cookie on your face. How do you get a cookie from your face into your mouth? Trying to get people, and if they post a video of it, they get signed up for a raffle. So trying to connect with our community in creative ways and get them out to use the spaces. So I think Shakopee Rec at Home and our virtual programs has been a success, and a shout out to the staff that have made that happen. The ice arena and the outdoor fields were able to open on June 1st. That was a curveball from the governor. Thankfully, staff was able to field that ball, and the ice arena was one of only 5 in the state that opened on June 1st. And so kudos to Troy and his staff that were able to make that happen. Consequently, for the month of June, we've more than doubled what our revenues were last June, and so that's a positive trend. We've got a lot of figure skaters in there. We got a lot of hockey players in there. They are just having to do things differently. And I think one of the phrases right now for the staff is very dynamic. Every day is changing. What we're allowed to do and how we do it is having to adapt to the environment, and staff has demonstrated their ability to do that. Outdoor fields, thanks to the parks maintenance folks and Sherry working with the associations. The associations got their plans in. They're keeping their kids safe. They're doing what they need to be doing, and the kids are out there on the fields right now. We had to look at what our summer brochure was going to be. A lot of our neighboring cities canceled their summer programs completely. We did not want to do that, but we couldn't deliver what was programmed in March. So we scrapped the March catalog, and yesterday, this brochure went out just digitally, and it offers programs for the months of June, July, and August that we can do while in compliance with the restrictions that we have under COVID. Youth programs, fitness programs, and one thing that why we kept it digitally is because it's dynamic. We've had some staffing issues in what we can do, and today we were able to get enough of our aquatic staff on that this is going to change tomorrow, and we're going to be adding swimming lessons. We weren't sure that we were going to be able to do it, but we have to be able to respond to the dynamic changing nature of what we're capable of doing. And another thing that we did when the messenger went out at the beginning of the month, we didn't have a lot of information in terms of what we could do. And so we posted an updated trail map. We had a lot of questions about what's happening with the trails. We aren't ready yet to produce the really nice fold-out map that we've had in the past. So this was a way that we could get it into our citizens' hand. This is where trails are at today in 2020, and we're moving towards a new map in the future, but this got it in their hands for now. The community center is scheduled to reopen on July 6th. Some long poles in that tent that have made it difficult to get there was first we needed supplies. I'm happy to report that we've got the necessary supplies so that we can do the cleaning that we need to do. And those involve some sprayers so that we can keep things sanitized in between use. A key component that we did not have on hand was a reservation system. I'm happy to report that we are building that. I can't show it to you today because we're still building it. We were in meetings yesterday, and we'll have it built by the end of the week, and then we'll get a one-pager out to our customers so that they can figure out how to onboard it. What that means is, in order to provide predictability for the facility, people will come in, they know when they can get on what they want to get on and when they need to get out. And they can be confident that the space is going to be clean. We are offering as much as we can. So the aquatic center will be opening, the leisure pool and the lap pool will both be opening to restricted numbers. The fitness floor will be opening. We'll have fitness classes in 3 rooms. We've activated the multi-purpose room as a fitness room. And the walking track will be opening. And the gymnasium will be open for basketball and for pickleball. It will only be open to members at this time because we have to manage our numbers. And for drop-ins, it's too difficult right now to know who's going to come, when are they going to come. But we hope to be able to open that up soon. So we'll see as the
Time to join the community center.
It would be. Also in keeping to take care of our members, we've had a lot of questions about the membership. So the membership, if you are a monthly member, your monthly membership will not start charging again until August 1st. If you are an annual member, you will get a 4-month credit on the end of your annual membership. So your membership won't expire until 4 months after would have expired previously. Okay. And we sent a letter out expressing that to all of our members. We haven't got any questions about that yet. We also shared with them all of the things that are going to be opening and let them know that as soon as we have, it's called Group X Pro is the reservation system, as soon as we have that in. Of interest to you, as I follow Nate, on the revenue side of things, I'd mentioned that ICE revenues for June are doubled from June 2019. I just mentioned what's going to happen with memberships, and registration for the summer programs opened today. So we're hopeful that those will fill quickly. Subject to your questions, that's all I have for the update.
Questions of Jay? I guess my comments, Jay, thank you very much. I've watched online. I drive by the facility every day. I do see, the empty parking lot, but I go online and see the engagement with what you've done, the videos, the trivia questions. It really shows how adaptable. And now when you're coming to open the ice arena and the community center, getting ready for that, it shows you're being innovative. And the resiliency of our community center. I know, it's certainly a part of our budget, but I think to get it back open, to give some normalcy to our community is real important. We all want to be safe and secure. But as you're seeing with the hockey rink, there's some pent-up demand. And actually, that's a good thing, right? People want to get out, they want to go do something. So looking forward to the next 30, 60 days here, and seeing how us opening and how we can create a positive experience for our residents. Thank you for your effort. Jay?
Thank you. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. This is a long time coming, and a lot of people want to get back active, but we do have to remember we are still in a global pandemic. So I am really concerned about people in complacency, and we got to make sure we're keeping it as clean as we can. People are going to use it on their own, whether they want to, or if they want to or not. They can choose to do that, but we have to do our part in keeping the public safe. And so whatever we can do, and we got to keep that on everybody's mind every day, so that it doesn't get into that complacent mode.
If I could speak to a couple measures that might reassure you on that. So members will not be allowed into the facility until they've been checked in by a host at the front door. And then once they get checked in, the previous session for whatever they're heading to will come out. They'll check in and go to do their session. In between that transition period is when staff will have the opportunity to clean. And what's great is it's not actually a contact clean. We have these new sprayers that disinfect it, so it takes, seconds instead of minutes, since we're having to cover a lot of surface area. We've also tried to limit the number of contact surfaces that we have to clean. So we've put all the furniture into storage so no one will stop and sit on it. And in protecting our staff, we've gotten some barriers very similar to what we have here at City Hall. So we want to take care of our staff. We want to take care of our citizens.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilor Lehman?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is in general, but I'm going to use the walking track as an example. So there's people walking on the walking track, and the 6 feet separation is critical. Are we posting signage up to remind people that this is a requirement, or?
Absolutely, Councilmember Lehman. There's signage all over the place to include even the flow of people coming in and out of the building. So there's different colored dots, so that when you come in the building, you stay to the right, you go to where your space is, and as you exit the building, you stay to the right. Blue dot going in, red dot going out. It's worked very well. We've had the chance to practice this with the ice arena with a lower level of population traffic, and we've had some lessons learned that we'll be implementing at the community center.
And the dots and the spacing are not unusual to our ice arena or community center. They're everywhere. They're in every store. They're out there, and we need people. You're right, not to be complacent.
Well, and Mayor, I'm just following up on Councilor Whiting's comments, because in my own personal business, people just forget. They walk in and they want to walk up to you, and they just forget. And they're not. And you got to tell them, stop, back up, 6 feet. And most people are good with that. They just are human beings, and it's natural to just continue on. I mean, after 40, however old somebody is, 40, 50-year-old, of doing it one way, and all of a sudden they have to do it another way, it's just not, they're just acting naturally. So it's a hard habit to break, and sometimes they have to be reminded. So I think the signage is a good idea. It's a great idea.
So we've definitely got signage, but we're also changing the way that we're staffing it. So I think having someone there holding someone accountable and reminding them,
Sure.
particularly as you're moving from one space to another space, that's when people are going to forget.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize that no other department quite literally had to be as flexible and had to be as nimble as Jay's department. If you think about it, most of the other departments, administration, everything else, we figured out how to do it, and we did it. But Jay didn't even know if he was going to be able to be open. He didn't know what programs he could have. It was constantly changing. He was already working on a plan with the ice arena, and then bam, it opened.
3 days later.
And so we were able to go ahead and open it because of the work and the leaning forward that his department has done. So they've done a great job. Like I said, they've been more flexible than anyone, and they're continuing to be flexible. And it's been a great job from the organization all around.
Good job, by the way. Good job.
Thank you.
Councilor Brennan?
I also want to thank you and the staff on being creative and flexible on what you're doing. I know that it's been a hard situation not knowing what's coming next, and I just thought personally on the employees. So I really appreciate everything. I know my husband's really looking forward to getting back into the community center, and I explained to him that he's going to have to make a reservation, and it's going to be hard for him to to conform to rules. I have a question about the reservation system, and I know that you're not quite ready for it, but is it? Do you have options if people don't have the ability to go online, or is it a call-in or?
So ideally, everyone will have the opportunity to do it online, but we recognize that we have 151 members right now who don't have email addresses. And so if that's the case, if they call in, staff will help someone make a reservation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Contreras?
Mr. Tobin, I'd like to first, say awesome work to you and your staff for adapting to the environment. I appreciate all the hard work that you guys are putting into it. And I do have two questions. One is in regards to our active adults. Is there something we're doing to, I know with all the restrictions, something we're doing for our active adults?
The active older adults?
Yes.
Our seniors are probably the most challenging right now for us to figure out how to connect with and take care of, because they're the most vulnerable to what's going on, and we want to be the most careful and sensitive to make sure that we keep them safe. So what we have been doing is our senior coordinator, Mary Veltman, has been contacting those who have been actively involved in programs and just checking up on them. We partnered with some local schools while they were, some elementary school classes while they were still in session, and they wrote some lovely letters to seniors that we were able to distribute. But as far as forward programming, we can't open the senior center right now, and we can't go forward with programming. That's actually pretty clearly spelled out in the implementation guidance from state. So we're trying a creative solution. One of the things we're hoping to pull off is something along the lines of parking lot bingo. So they don't have to get out of their cars. They can come to the space. They can see each other, and we don't have to worry about enforcing social distancing with folks who are excited to see each other. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. And if anyone has any other creative ideas, we'd love to hear them, because that's the one that's been the hardest for us to figure out.
Right. Thank you. And one other question. I know, again, the reservation system isn't quite done and you're working on it. But the Group X Pro, would you know, or if you've looked into, would it be in other languages? Will it be inclusive?
So at this time, we don't have a plan to implement. I have to do some more research to see what's possible. But I think the inclusivity in terms of our offerings, as we look at the demographics of our membership, we need to be more proactive about that going forward. And so I will look into that, and we will figure out what's possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, thank you very, very much. Our community, we really have an opportunity here to be safe and secure, but to get out and to enjoy our facilities and keep everybody safe. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do, before I leave, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to the staff. Yeah. So I lead an amazing team of teams that are incredibly creative and they make our department work and make it look good. So all of the things that are working, I stand on the shoulders of giants. They're doing yeoman's work, and I'm grateful for them. So,
Great.
Great work.
thanks.
Thank you, thank you. All right, moving ahead, 11A, the city bill list for our review. Any questions on that? Seeing none, we would move ahead then to liaison reports and administration report. Counselor Contreras?
And you caught me. I was trying to get everything in order. Here we go. For the Shakopee School Board, on Monday, Shakopee School hosted an online community conversation about the district's financial challenges. In addition, the school board superintendent, Mike Redmond, and finance director, Bill Minazzi, and board chair, Christy Peterson, answered questions from the community. The next steps, on June 22nd, the board will begin to review proposed budget cuts for the 2020-21 and 2021-22 school years. The board is expected to vote on budget adjustment options, including the proposed budget cuts, at its July 20 meeting. If you want to join and if you have something to say, there are virtual chats with the superintendent and the school board. The next one would be this coming Thursday, June 18th, from 7 a.m. to 8:30, and that's coffee with the superintendent, no appointment needed. And then the next one would be Tuesday, June 23rd, from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30, and that's coffee chat with the school board. They're both Google Meets. And if you'd like more information on that, you visit shakopee.k12.mn.us. The Shakopee Diversity Alliance. On June 6th, the grocery distribution that we went to help out again, that we've been doing with COVID-19 help. For Shakopee, there were 690 families served, a total of 4,235 individuals. And then this last Saturday, which was the last Saturday that the food drive will be held, was 609 families, 2,923 individuals. And again, there's other numbers because now they have a second location, which is in Bloomington. And then I just want to say thank you to everybody, all the volunteers. It wouldn't have happened if all these people who gave their Saturdays to go help out if they wouldn't have done it, it would have never been possible. So we're forever grateful for that. And that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Counselor, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Counselor Lehman?
Thank you, Mayor. Attended the scale meeting. Some notes that I have was the federal dollars, CARE Act 541 million, Scott County 17.1 million, Shakopee, as you know, 3.1 million. It's not able to be used for lost revenue, which we already know from earlier tonight. Senator Pratt talked a little bit about $127 per capita in local assistance used by December 30th. I don't know if that passed or not yet. There was discussion about the Dakota project, which is a local road on Highway 13 by the ports in Savage, which our council has supported. Part of it is in the bonding bill, parts of it for the county, the county wheelage tax dollars. Some of it is state bonding and some is fed. That seems to be rising up as an important part of that bonding bill, if there's a bonding bill. Representative Bob Vogel spoke. Unemployment is much higher than anticipated. He's got extensive banking experience, huge economic concerns with pension, period deficits, banking sector, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of spending going on and not a whole lot of revenue. COVID related, obviously. Due to a budget reserve and the economic situation, scale is reducing contributions by 50% for the next budget cycle to the communities. Good thing. And then I also participated in the regional training facility meeting. The use was on target up to COVID. So they did see a decline in use at the training facility once the COVID issue hit. Expenses were a little bit over up to that in 19, and revenue also was up a little to offset the expense. Fund balance 2019, 416,000, about 200,000 is unreserved. 2020, down obviously from COVID, additional expense for the burn unit. And as Councilor Brennan pointed out in previous meetings, the boiler replacement, but now it's the fuel tank for the boiler was also replaced, and that was a carryover expense. There was discussion about a recalculation using market value. I'm a little reluctant. I'm going to have to dig into that a little deeper because obviously, as we know, Shakopee's putting a lot of market value on that's not necessarily representative of the types of services that would use the facility, i.e. police, fire, stuff like that. Usually that's a residential driver, not a big commercial project. So they opted for now not to do that. And we actually decided they're going to redo new pregs calculation using all of new preg, which is probably going to lower ours just a little bit. So that's a good thing. Kind of talked quite a bit about, I talked quite a bit about how do we maximize the use of a facility by adding other users from outside the core membership, because I recall in the beginning, I led the charge to help get the votes in the Senate, Minnesota Senate, in the bonding for that facility way back when. And part of that discussion was the goal was to add users to reduce our cost. And, you know, we talked about marketing strategies. The fees will remain flat for the next year. Our contribution will go down a little bit. And they're researching online scheduling along with the fees online. That's being looked at and studied, possibly a consultant to help out to figure out if we can get more users to participate and collaborate and help offset some of these costs. You know, I personally think there's some opportunity for some unique type training at that facility, and especially in light of some current issues, whether it's racism or police, public relations. There's all kinds of opportunities, I think, for classroom type uses that there's space for at that facility. So a good discussion really was had. You know, this is what my second meeting, so I'm getting up to speed, and, you know, I'd really like to see, you know, I'd like to see, honestly, if we're gonna, this facility does have some unique characteristics compared to its competing counterparts. The competing counterparts are, like we would all envision, a training center where you go to a building campus, use a room, but this facility has outside spaces, open spaces that could be utilized for a lot of unique type situations that we're maybe not capitalizing on like we could. Where it could be marketed to where these other campuses don't have these amenities that this site does. So that's something that we have here that we're not capitalizing on, and we're going to take a look at that too. So
That'd be great.
that's my report.
I have a question.
Okay.
Question?
They've used, Valley Fair has used the building for dormitories. Did they mention that at all? And because the employees at Valley Fair would use that space. Did they bring up the impact of not having Valley Fair open or delayed opening on the facility?
Well, the discussion that we hit on a little bit was about using Valley Fair space as a homeless shelter. Not necessarily for Valley Fair's employees, but for people out of housing. There's a lot of discussions by a lot of law enforcement personnel throughout the region that came up and weren't completely vetted. So that discussion will come back. Nobody had the answers to what them concerns were.
Yeah, that was a discussion, yeah.
Yeah, so I suspect that discussion might come back with more information from what the concerns are, since nobody knew what precisely them concerns were. And nobody had direct information from Valley Fair. I guess one of the issues that really kind of clouds this is if you want to start something using the Valley Fair site for homeless, at the same time, Valley Fair is trying to figure out when do we get to open. Do we open on a limited basis? Well, we need some of this, and it becomes a timing issue also. So more to follow.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Brennan, liaison report.
Okay, I had two meetings since we last met. The first was the Live, Learn, and Earn meeting on housing. And the committee is working on a housing plan for Scott County. Savage and myself for Shakopee presented our comprehensive plans for our cities. And I want to thank the planning department for putting together housing numbers so that I could present it. And I asked Mr. Reynolds to forward the PowerPoint presentation on heading home Scott and Carver County. This is a plan that's supposedly going to end homelessness in our counties. I thought it was kind of interesting that talked a lot about Scott County and not much about Carver County. So we'll see how that moves forward. Yesterday I had the SPUC meeting and the city of Shakopee sent a letter to the commissioners that offered to combine HR and finance departments. This is an opportunity to save ratepayers money, increase internal efficiencies, and establish controls. Last night, the commission directed John Crooks to meet with Nate Burkett to work on a plan and present it to the commission at the next meeting, which is July 6th. The commission also directed John Crooks to suspend the search for a director of finance and administration. That's to see what the plan that is being put together and how that would affect that position. And then I met with Bill Reynolds this morning to inform him of the actions that the commission took and to let him know that the commission would like Nate Burkett to meet with John in order to develop a plan. That's all I have on SPUC.
Okay. Thank you. That opportunity for finance and HR is a true opportunity of efficiency and effectiveness. It could be interesting to see how that plan can come together over the next period of time. Councilor Whiting.
I had no liaisons to report on, so thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I have a couple items. Our organization, the MLC, which is a Municipal Legislative Committee that we're a member of here in Shakopee, had a Zoom meeting on June 11th with the governor, 19 mayors, and trying to talk about opening Minnesota. I know he's turned the dial a couple of times. I think we'll see more of that coming up. Also, there was a great deal of discussion on CARES and the funding and what it can be used for to help the city. So the MLC is strong and they're united on their topic. So I thought that was good. Over the last week, I've met with staff here at the city. Wednesday, the Scott County mayors are going to have a meeting with Paul Gazelka, and we're going to discuss at least the Senate version of the bonding bill that includes language from Housing Minnesota or Housing First, the old Batke group. Right now in the Senate bill, it's all from that lobbyist association wording in there. Trying to take local control away from our land use issues. So we're going to have the Scott County mayors talk tomorrow on that. Also last night, a little bit of history, not a lot of history, but 30 years, and our local business Turtles celebrated 30 years last night, and they've been kind of one of our grounding rocks right in our downtown area over that time. They've seen a lot of change. I was mentioning that River City Center wasn't even built by then. The old bank where City Hall was across the street. So a lot of change, yet a constant was Turtles. So that was pretty cool. Also, I would like to take a moment to recognize our city administrator, Bill Reynolds. Also found out that yesterday was his 5-year anniversary as a city administrator here. You were hired by a different council, and that's fine. I know that when you started, you wore a lot of hats. I think you took out the garbage, you answered the door and the phone. But we really, I value and appreciate your efforts here in our community. I think you've brought our community forward in a positive way over the last 5 years. I'm very proud to have you as our city administrator, and happy 5 years, and hoping for many more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That is my mayor update, and then we would go to the administration report.
Just really quickly, we obviously have a special session occurring with the Minnesota state government currently. We are monitoring the events. There was some additions in the bonding bill for the Senate. Our projects still have not made the Senate bonding bill. There is still going to be more negotiation between the Senate and the House. So we are trying to influence that discussion and try to get at least one project of ours in the bonding bill. And out of those projects, I think the riverbank stabilization is probably the most important one and the one that has the longest reaching impact. So frankly, that's kind of where we're focusing right now. But I will continue to keep you updated on what comes out of the special session. It's been interesting, following the Minnesota State House now for my 5th year. This has been truly strange because there are times where something would come up, you'd jump in your car, you'd drive to St. Paul, you knock on a few doors and try to tell people how important something was. And here it's essentially setting up Zoom meetings to try to make sure people are aware of issues. There are a lot of issues that are very important to local government that are on the table right now. The mayor mentioned some of the housing first slash BATC proposals, which really eviscerate cities' abilities to, direct what should be in their own communities and basically gives the state control of all of that. And that's something we've been fighting against for at least a year now, since BATC started putting out their misinformation campaign on what cities were doing. So I'll keep you updated on that as well in the future, so stay tuned. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Reynolds, thank you very much. Moving ahead, number 12, other business. Is there any other business before this council? Seeing none? Then, Councilor Whiting, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, July 7th, 2020 at 7 p.m.
I have a motion and a second by Councilor Brennan. Further discussion? Discussion by voice vote. Mr. Reynolds?
Councilor Contreras.
Aye.
Councilor Brennan.
Thanks, Jim.
Aye.
Councilor Whiting.
Aye.
Councilor Lehman.
Aye.
Mayor Mars.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much at 10:01.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.